Clara Whitlock wasn't supposed to be here. She stood at the edge of the garden reception, champagne flute trembling in her grip, watching Thomas Ashford, her former fiancé, lean down to kiss his bride. The crowd applauded. Clara's stomach turned. They'd invited her here to be seen, to be proof. Look, Thomas bears no grudge. See how gracious he is? Clearly, she was the problem all along. Behind a rose trellis, two men in tailored suits spoke in low voices. Clara caught fragments. Diverted funds, completely untraceable. Those rural dispensaries won't last the winter. Brilliant. Really? Using her charity records as cover? Her breath caught. They were talking about her money, her work. Her name used to rob the dying. The glass slipped from her hand and shattered. Every head turned. Clara ran. She made it 3 steps before colliding with something solid. A man's chest, black wool, the scent of smoke and winter air. Hands caught her shoulders. She looked up into slate-gray eyes that held no judgment, only cold assessment. "Steady," Adrian Blackmore said quietly. "The Duke of Northmere, a man even Thomas feared. I need to leave," Clara whispered. Adrian glanced past her at the murmuring crowd, then back at her face. Whatever he saw there made his decision. "Come with me." He didn't wait for an answer. His hand closed around hers, and he led her through a side gate as whispers erupted behind them like wildfire. Clara Whitlock had just made a choice she couldn't take back. But this is only where the storm begins. Stay with me through this whole story. I want to know how far it reaches. Drop a comment with your city so I can see where you're watching from. Hit that like button. And let me show you what happens when a woman decides she's done being quiet. The carriage wheels rattled over cobblestones, and Clara pressed herself against the seat, her breathing still ragged. She could feel the Duke's eyes on her, but he hadn't spoken since they'd left the manor grounds. The silence stretched, oppressive and strange. "You don't know me," Clara said finally, hating how thin her voice sounded. "No. Then why—" "You looked like you were drowning." Adrian leaned back, arms crossed. His face was unreadable in the dim carriage light. "I don't particularly care for watching people drown at garden parties. Bad form." Clara almost laughed. It came out as a choked sound instead. "They think I'm mad," she said. "Unstable. A jilted woman who couldn't handle rejection." "Are you?" "No." The word came out harder than she'd intended. "I'm the woman who knew too much and said nothing. That's worse." Adrian tilted his head slightly. "Then why run now?" "Because I just heard 2 men celebrate stealing from the poor using my name as a shield." Her hands clenched in her lap. "And I realized I've been complicit in my own silence." Something flickered across Adrian's expression. Interest, perhaps. Or recognition. "Where are we going?" Clara asked. "Blackmore Estate. You need somewhere they won't follow." "I can't just—" "You can." Adrian's tone didn't invite argument. "Unless you'd prefer to return to that reception and explain yourself to a room full of people who've already decided you're guilty of something." Clara closed her eyes. He was right. She had nowhere else to go. Her parents had distanced themselves after the broken engagement. Her friends, if she'd ever really had any, had melted away like morning frost. Even her small flat in the city felt compromised now, tainted by the knowledge of what Thomas and his associates had done. "I don't understand why you're helping me," she said quietly. Adrian was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before. "Let's just say I know what it's like to be the subject of unfair scrutiny." The carriage turned onto a tree-lined road, and Clara caught her first glimpse of Blackmore Estate through the window. It was enormous. Gray stone walls rising against the darkening sky, windows glowing with warm light. Intimidating. Beautiful. Isolated. Everything she needed right now. The carriage stopped. A footman appeared to open the door, his expression carefully neutral as Adrian stepped out and offered Clara his hand. She took it, her fingers cold against his warmth. "Mrs. Brennan will show you to a room," Adrian said as they entered the main hall. An older woman with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes appeared almost immediately, as if summoned by thought alone. "Your Grace," Mrs. Brennan said, her gaze sweeping over Clara with professional assessment. "Shall I prepare the blue room?" "Yes, and have a meal sent up. Miss Whitlock has had a difficult evening." Clara started to protest, but Adrian had already turned away, disappearing down a corridor with long, purposeful strides. She was left standing in the cavernous entryway, feeling suddenly very small. "This way, miss," Mrs. Brennan said, not unkindly. The blue room turned out to be a suite larger than Clara's entire flat. The walls were papered in soft azure silk, and a fire already crackled in the hearth. A four-poster bed dominated one side of the room, its linens crisp and white. Through an open door, Clara could see a bathing room with a copper tub. "I'll have hot water brought up," Mrs. Brennan said, "and some suitable clothing for tomorrow. You look about the same size as—" She stopped abruptly. "As who?" Clara asked. Mrs. Brennan's expression flickered. "His Grace's late sister. Her things are still in storage. She wouldn't mind the loan." Before Clara could respond, the housekeeper had swept out, leaving her alone with the fires crackling and her own racing thoughts. She moved to the window. The ground stretched out below, manicured gardens giving way to wild parkland. In the distance, she could see lights from what might be a village. How many people lived in Adrian Blackmore's shadow? Did they trust him? Fear him? Both? A knock at the door. Two maids entered with buckets of steaming water, filling the tub with efficient silence. A third brought a tray: soup, bread, cheese, wine. They left as quickly as they'd come. Clara ate mechanically, tasting nothing. Her mind kept circling back to those fragments of conversation at the wedding. Diverted funds, rural dispensaries, her charity records. For 2 years, Clara had quietly funneled money to struggling communities on the city's outskirts and in the countryside beyond. Medicine, food, heating fuel for the winter months. It wasn't much, just what she could spare from her own modest inheritance, but it had made a difference, or so she'd thought. Now she wondered how long Thomas and his associates had been skimming from those accounts. How long had they been using her good intentions to line their own pockets while people suffered? The thought made her physically ill. She pushed the tray away and moved to the bathing room. The hot water was a mercy she didn't deserve, but she sank into it anyway, letting the heat work into her tense muscles. Clara must have dozed because when she opened her eyes, the water had gone lukewarm and the light outside had shifted to full darkness. She climbed out, dried herself, and found a nightgown laid out on the bed, simple white cotton that smelled of lavender and cedar. Sleep should have come easily after such a day. Instead, Clara lay awake, staring at the canopy above her bed, her mind churning with questions she couldn't answer and guilt she couldn't escape. She'd known something was wrong. Not the specifics, perhaps, but she'd sensed it. The way Thomas had suddenly taken such keen interest in her charitable work. The way he'd ask questions about which communities she was helping, how much she was sending, when the next disbursements would occur. She'd thought he was being supportive. She'd been such a fool. The broken engagement had come shortly after. Thomas had been apologetic, regretful, careful to paint himself as the reluctant party. "We're not suited," he'd said, with those sad eyes that now made her want to scream. "You're too idealistic, Clara, too soft-hearted. I need someone more practical." The rumors had started within a week. Clara, unstable. Clara, obsessive. Clara, unable to accept reality. By the time she'd understood what was happening, the damage was done. Her reputation was in tatters, and Thomas was already courting Eleanor Rothwell, whose family had money and connections Clara's lacked. And through it all, Clara had stayed silent. She'd withdrawn, let the whispers wash over her, told herself it was easier to endure than to fight. Now people were dying because of her cowardice. Clara turned onto her side, pulling the blankets up to her chin. Tomorrow she would figure out what to do. Tomorrow she would find a way to make this right, if such a thing were even possible. Morning came too soon, announced by pale sunlight streaming through the windows. Clara woke to find clothing laid out on a chair, a simple day dress in deep green wool, underthings, stockings, boots. All of it fit perfectly, though wearing a dead woman's clothes made her skin prickle with discomfort. She found her way downstairs following the smell of coffee and discovered a breakfast room with tall windows overlooking the gardens. Adrian was already there, reading a newspaper, a cup of black coffee at his elbow. "Good morning," he said without looking up. "Help yourself." Clara filled a plate with things she didn't want and sat across from him. The silence stretched. She forced down a bite of toast. "I need to go to Millbrook," she said abruptly. Adrian lowered his newspaper. "The village?" "There's a dispensary there, or there was. I funded it for 18 months before." She trailed off. I need to see it. Why? Because I need to know how bad it is. Adrian studied her for a long moment. It's bad, he said finally. I've had reports. The dispensary closed 3 months ago. No supplies, no funding, no staff. The nearest physician is in Ashford, 12 miles away. Too far for most. Claire's chest tightened. People are dying. Yes. The simple affirmation was worse than any lengthy explanation. Clara set down her fork, her appetite gone completely. I have to see it, she said again. Adrian folded his newspaper with precise movements. Then I'll take you. You don't have to, Miss Whitlock. His voice was firm but not unkind. You're under my roof, which makes you my responsibility. If you're going to Millbrook, I'm going with you, unless you'd prefer to walk 12 miles in borrowed boots. Clara wanted to argue, but pragmatism won out. Fine, thank you. We'll leave within the hour. The village of Millbrook huddled in a valley between rolling hills, its buildings gray stone and weathered timber. Smoke rose from a handful of chimneys, but many houses stood dark and silent. The streets were nearly empty despite the morning hour. Adrian's carriage drew looks as it rolled through the village square. Clara saw faces in windows, wary and hollow-eyed. A few children played in the mud, their clothes too thin for the season. The dispensary sat at the edge of the village, a small building with a blue door that Clara had paid to have painted herself. Now the paint was peeling, and one window was boarded over. The door hung slightly crooked on its hinges. Wait here, Adrian told the driver, then helped Clara down from the carriage. The door wasn't locked. It creaked open at Clara's touch, revealing a single room that had once been clean and organized. Now it was chaos. Empty shelves lined the walls. A few broken bottles littered the floor. In one corner, someone had clearly been sleeping. There was a pile of rags that might have been a makeshift bed. Clara walked slowly through the space, her footsteps echoing. She remembered how it had looked before. Shelves stocked with medicines, a sturdy table for examinations, a local woman named Mrs. Garrett, who'd been trained as a nurse, always ready with a kind word and capable hands. Now there was nothing. Clara! Adrian's voice pulled her attention to the far wall. Adrian's voice, where someone had scratched words into the plaster with what looked like a piece of charcoal. Where did you go? Her breath caught. They think I abandoned them, she whispered. Did you? Clara spun to face him, anger flaring hot in her chest. I didn't know. I sent the money. Every month. I thought, I'm not accusing you, Adrian said calmly. I'm asking what happened. Oh, Clara pressed her palms to her eyes, forcing herself to breathe. Thomas, he convinced me to consolidate my charity accounts. Said it would be more efficient, easier to track. I trusted him. The words tasted like ash. He was handling the disbursements after that. I still sent the money, but he managed where it went, or where it was supposed to go. And he diverted it. Yes. Clara lowered her hands. I should have checked. I should have visited. You should have been able to trust your fiancé, Adrian interrupted. The failure is his, not yours. That doesn't help these people. No, Adrian agreed. It doesn't. A sound from the doorway made them both turn. An elderly man stood there, leaning heavily on a walking stick, his face deeply lined and his eyes were hummy. He stared at Clara with an expression she couldn't read. You're her, he said. Miss Whitlock. Clara's throat felt tight. Yes. We thought you'd forgotten us. I didn't forget. How could she explain? What could she possibly say that would make this better? I'm so sorry. The man was quiet for a moment, his gaze moving around the ruined dispensary. My wife died last month. Fever. Would have been simple to treat before. But there was nothing. No medicine, no one to help. He looked back at Clara. You were supposed to help. I know. The words came out barely above a whisper. I know, and I will. I promise. Promises? The man's laugh was bitter. That's all we've had. Promises from the city folk who come through, make their pledges, collect their good feelings, and leave. We don't need more promises. Miss, we need food, medicine, fuel for the winter that's coming. He paused. We need someone who'll actually stay. He turned and shuffled away before Clara could respond. She stood frozen in the middle of the empty room, shame and fury and grief warring inside her chest. Behind her, she heard Adrian move closer. You can't fix this in a day, he said quietly. I can try. Clara, don't. She spun to face him. Don't tell me it's not my fault, or that I couldn't have known, or any other comforting lie. Those people trusted me. That man's wife died because I was too stupid and too trusting to see what was happening right in front of me. And now? Adrian asked. What will you do now? Clara looked around the dispensary one more time at the empty shelves and broken glass, and that desperate message scratched into the wall. I'm going to make it right, she said, whatever it takes. Back at Blackmore Estate, Clara went straight to the library and began making lists. She'd never been particularly good at numbers, but desperation made her focused. She calculated what she had left of her own money. Not much, after 2 years of quiet charity and Thomas's theft. She estimated what it would cost to restock the dispensary, to hire staff, to provide food and fuel for the village through winter. The numbers didn't add up. She had maybe a quarter of what she needed, and that was assuming she could even access her remaining funds without Thomas or his associates interfering. You'll bankrupt yourself. Clara looked up to find Adrian in the doorway, still in his riding coat from their trip to the village. Probably, she agreed. That's not a solution. It's the only one I have. Adrian crossed to the desk where she sat, glancing down at her scribbled calculations. There are better ways. Such as? Let me handle it. Clara laughed without humor. Why would you do that? These aren't your people. This isn't your problem. No, Adrian said. But you're under my protection now, which makes it my concern. And I have resources you lack. I won't be in debt to you. I'm not asking you to be. Adrian pulled out a chair and sat across from her. I'm offering a practical solution. I fund the immediate needs, medicine, food, fuel. You work with me to establish something sustainable. A proper dispensary with reliable support. Not charity that can be stolen or mismanaged, but a real institution. B. Clara wanted to refuse. Her pride screamed at her to refuse. But she thought of that old man's face, his wife dead from a treatable fever, and pride seemed like a luxury she couldn't afford. Why? She asked. Why do you care? Adrian was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming once against the desk. My sister, he said finally. Catherine. She died of pneumonia 5 years ago. Preventable, if she'd had proper care. But we were traveling, and the local physician was inadequate. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I've funded medical initiatives since then. This is hardly different. I'm sorry, Claire said, about your sister. Adrian nodded once, accepting the sympathy without comment. So, do we have an arrangement? Clara looked down at her inadequate numbers, at the impossible task ahead of her, swallowed her pride. Yes, she said. We have an arrangement. Good. Adrian stood. I'll have my solicitor draw up the papers. We'll start with Millbrook, then assess the other communities you were supporting, quietly, for now. I assume you don't want Thomas knowing what we're doing. Definitely not. What at all? Then we'll be discreet. Adrian moved toward the door, then paused. Clara? She looked up. What you said earlier about being complicit in your silence, that's over now. You understand that? Yes? Clara thought of the dispensary, of the old man's bitter accusation, of the message scratched into the wall. Thought of Thomas and his smug smile at the wedding. Yes, she said, I understand. Adrian nodded and left her alone with her lists and her determination. Over the next week, Blackmore Estate became a strange kind of headquarters. Adrian's solicitor arrived with documents. His steward came with ledgers and supply contacts. Clara worked alongside them, learning the mechanics of institutional charity versus her previous haphazard approach. It was harder than she'd expected. Everything had to be documented, verified, cross-checked. Adrian insisted on accountability at every level, on systems that couldn't be easily corrupted or diverted. You're creating a fortress, Clara observed one evening as they reviewed another set of contracts in the library. I'm creating something that will last, Adrian corrected. That's the difference between sentiment and structure. You don't believe in sentiment? I believe in results. He made a notation in the margin of a contract. Sentiment is easy. Anyone can feel sorry for suffering. Actually ending it requires work. Clara studied him in the firelight. Adrian Blackmore had a reputation as a cold man, ruthlessly efficient in business and indifferent to social graces. Now she was seeing where that reputation came from and realizing it wasn't quite accurate. He wasn't indifferent. He just refused to let emotion replace action. What? Adrian asked, noticing her gaze. Nothing. Just thank you for all of this. Don't thank me yet. We haven't actually accomplished anything. But they were close. Supplies were being gathered in Ashford for discreet transport to Millbrook. Adrian had found a physician willing to relocate, a young doctor named Peter Grayson who'd been practicing in London but was eager for the countryside. Mrs. Garrett, the former dispensary nurse, had been located and offered her position back with a proper salary. Things were moving. And then, 10 days after the wedding, Thomas appeared. Clara was in the morning room reviewing inventory lists when Mrs. Brennan announced him. She looked up in shock. He's insisting, miss. Says it's urgent. Clara's hands clenched on the papers. Where's the Duke? Riding the estate. Won't be back for an hour at least. Of course. Thomas had probably timed his visit deliberately. Clara forced herself to breathe. Show him in. Thomas entered looking exactly as he always did. Perfectly groomed, expensively dressed, that slight smile playing at his lips. The smile that used to make her feel safe. Now it made her want to scream. Clara, he said warmly. I've been so worried. Have you? Of course. He took a step closer. She stepped back. His smile flickered. When you ran from the wedding, I feared the worst. I'm relieved to find you safe. What do you want, Thomas? To help you. He spread his hands in a gesture of openness. I know how difficult things have been. The rumors, the isolation. It's not fair what society has done to you. You mean what you did to me? Clara, don't! Her voice came out harder than she'd known she could make it. Don't pretend this is about concern. Just say what you came to say. Thomas's expression shifted, the warmth draining away to reveal something colder beneath. Very well. I came to warn you. These accusations you've been making about missing funds, about my involvement in your charity work, they're dangerous, Clara. Damaging. To whom? To both of us. If you continue spreading these claims, I'll be forced to take legal action. Defamation. Slander. I have witnesses who will testify to your instability. Witnesses you've paid, you mean? Witnesses who will be believed, Thomas corrected. You're already viewed as unreliable. Making wild accusations against a respected businessman will only confirm everyone's worst assumptions about you. Clara felt cold spread through her chest. He was right. In a court of law, with her tattered reputation against his pristine one, she'd lose. Even if she had evidence, which she didn't, not yet. Who would believe her? You stole from the poor, she said quietly. You used my name to do it. What? She says. I redirected funds to more efficient uses, Thomas said. Your sentimental charity was wasteful. I improved the situation. People died. People die every day, Clara. That's not my fault or yours. He moved closer again. This time she held her ground. Come back to London. Let me help you rebuild your life. We can say you had a brief episode, that you're recovered now. I'm willing to support that narrative. In exchange for what? Your silence, your cooperation, and a public acknowledgement that you were mistaken about any financial irregularities. Clara stared at him. At this man she'd once imagined spending her life with, wondered how she'd ever been so blind. No, she said. Clara, get out. You're making a mistake. I said get out. Thomas's expression hardened. Fine. But when you end up penniless and completely ruined, don't come crying to me. I offered you a way forward. You're choosing destruction. Maybe, Clara said, But it'll be my choice. Now leave. He left, finally, his footsteps echoing through the hall. Clara stood alone in the morning room, shaking with rage and fear, and something else she was only beginning to recognize: power. Not over others, over herself, over her own story. She was still standing there when Adrian returned an hour later, striding into the room with mud on his boots and questions in his eyes. Mrs. Brennan said Thomas was here. He was. What did he want? Clara looked at Adrian, this strange, stern man who'd given her shelter without question, who'd listened without judgment, who'd turned her desperate impulse into concrete action. To make me be quiet, she said, to threaten me into cooperating with his version of events. And, young, Clara felt something crystallize inside her, hard and bright and unbreakable. And I told him no. Adrian's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Approval, maybe, or recognition of a fellow fighter. Good, he said. Then let's make sure you have the weapons to back that up. They worked through the night, Adrian and Clara and his solicitor, building a case. Not a legal one, not yet, but an informational one. Adrian sent messages to contacts in London, in the Treasury, in banking circles. He called in favors and made quiet inquiries. By dawn, they had the outline of something damning. Thomas hadn't just stolen from Clara's charity accounts. He'd been running a larger scheme, using multiple small charitable organizations as cover for embezzlement. Clara's money was just one stream in a river of diverted funds. How much? Clara asked, staring at the numbers the solicitor had compiled. Approximately £40,000 over 3 years. Clara felt dizzy. That much? That much, Adrian confirmed. And it gets worse. Some of that money was matched by government grants, which means Thomas didn't just steal from charitable donors. He stole from the crown. That's serious, Adrian finished. Very serious. If we can prove it. Can we? Adrian met her eyes. With time and access to the right records, yes. But it won't be clean, Clara. Thomas has powerful friends. Exposing this will make enemies. Clara thought of Millbrook, of the dispensary's empty shelves and that scratched message on the wall. Thought of £40,000 that could have saved lives. I don't care about making enemies, she said. I care about the truth. The truth has consequences. So does lying. Adrian held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, we do this properly, thoroughly. And when we move decisively. Agreed? Agreed. Vamos, son. They shook hands on it, there in the library as morning light filtered through the windows. Clara felt the weight of what they were starting, but also something lighter. Hope. For the first time in 2 years, she wasn't hiding, wasn't accepting the narrative others had written for her. She was fighting back, and she wasn't fighting alone. Borset. 3 weeks passed in a blur of careful investigation and quiet action. While Adrian's people dug into financial records, Clara focused on Millbrook. The dispensary reopened with Dr. Grayson and Mrs. Garrett in residence. Supplies arrived in unmarked wagons. Fuel was distributed to families who needed it. Clara visited twice a week, always with Adrian, always discreetly. She didn't announce herself or make grand gestures. She just helped. Organized supplies. Listened to Mrs. Garrett's concerns. Held children while Dr. Grayson examined them. The village slowly came back to life. Color returned to faces. The wariness in people's eyes faded, replaced by cautious hope. The old man whose wife had died came to the dispensary one afternoon while Clara was there. She braced herself for more accusation, more deserved anger. Instead, he said, "You came back." "Yes," Clara said simply. "My wife." He paused, his voice rough. "She'd be glad that you came back." It wasn't forgiveness. Clara didn't deserve that, but it was acknowledgement. A small measure of trust being offered again. "I'm sorry I left," Clara said. "I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening sooner." The old man nodded once and shuffled away. Clara stood in the dispensary's clean, stocked main room and let herself feel the weight of that moment. This was what mattered. Not her reputation in London. Not society's opinion. These people, these lives. Everything else was secondary. Adrian found her there at dusk, standing at the window watching the village settle into evening. "We have it," he said without preamble. Clara turned. "The evidence?" "Yes. Complete transaction records. Correspondence between Thomas and 3 other men documenting the scheme. Government grant applications with forged signatures." Adrian's expression was grim. "It's thorough, damning, impossible to refute." Clara felt her heart beating faster. "What happens now, Sec?" "Now we decide how to use it. We could go to the authorities quietly, let the legal system handle it. Or we make it public, force exposure. Ensure Thomas and his associates can't bury it or negotiate their way out." Clara thought about the quiet route, the proper channels. How easy it would be for powerful men to make inconvenient charges disappear. "Public," she said. "It has to be public. CQC. That means you'll be public too. Your name will be attached to this. You'll be examined, questioned, possibly attacked in the press. Thomas will try to discredit you however he can. Let him try." Clara felt that hard, bright certainty inside her again. "I'm done hiding. I'm done letting other people control my story." Adrian studied her for a long moment. "You've changed," he said, "from the woman who ran from that wedding." "I stopped running," Clara said simply. "Yes." Adrian moved to stand beside her at the window. "You did." They stood in silence, watching night settle over Millbrook. Somewhere in the village, a door opened, releasing lamplight and the sound of children laughing, signs of life returning. "When do we do this?" Clara asked. "Soon," Adrian said. "I'm arranging a meeting, Thomas and his associates, a few carefully selected officials, some press. We present everything at once, in a setting where they can't escape or deny." "Where?" Adrian's smile was cold. "Ashford Manor, Thomas's own home. Let him face the truth on his own ground." Clara felt a thrill of fierce satisfaction. Perfect. "It won't be easy, Clara. When we do this, there's no going back." She turned to face him fully. This man who'd sheltered her, believed her, fought beside her, who'd taught her that action mattered more than sentiment, but who'd never once dismissed what she felt. "I know," she said, "and I'm ready." Adrian held her gaze, and something passed between them. Understanding. Partnership. Trust earned through weeks of shared work and shared purpose. "Then we end this," he said. "Together." "Together," Clara agreed. Outside, the last light faded from the sky. Inside the dispensary, Mrs. Garrett lit lamps and began preparing for the evening clinic. The village breathed in the darkness, alive and healing. And Clara Whitlock stood at the window, no longer a woman running from her past, but a woman ready to face her future, whatever that might bring. The invitation arrived at Blackmore Estate on a gray morning, delivered by a nervous courier who wouldn't meet Adrian's eyes. Heavy cream paper, Thomas Ashford's seal pressed into black wax. Clara watched Adrian break it open, watched his jaw tighten as he read. "What is it?" she asked. Adrian handed her the card without comment. "Mr. Thomas Ashford requests the honor of the Duke of Northmere's presence at a charitable gala to benefit rural medical initiatives. Ashford Manor, Saturday next. Black tie." Clara's hands went cold. "He knows." "Probably suspects." Adrian moved to the window, his posture rigid. Someone talked. One of the suppliers, perhaps. Or he simply noticed the dispensary reopened and drawn conclusions. "This is a trap." "Obviously." "Then we don't go, see?" Adrian turned to face her. "We do go, but not the way he expects." Clara set the invitation down carefully, fighting the urge to tear it into pieces. "You want to confront him at his own event, surrounded by his allies and his money? I want to use his arrogance against him." Adrian's voice was level, controlled, but Clara heard the edge beneath. "Thomas thinks he's untouchable. He's inviting me, inviting us by extension, to show he's not afraid, to demonstrate his power. And you want to prove him wrong. I want to end this cleanly." Adrian crossed back to the desk, pulling out the folder of evidence they'd compiled. "We were planning a private confrontation, controlled environment, selected witnesses. But this changes things." "How?" Thomas has given us a stage, a room full of society's elite, all gathered to celebrate charity work he's been stealing from. The irony is too perfect to waste. Clara felt her pulse quicken. You want to expose him there, in front of everyone. Not want, need to. Adrian's fingers drummed once against the folder. If we wait, give him time to prepare defenses, this gets messy. Legal battles, he said, she said. His reputation against yours. But if we present everything publicly, with witnesses who matter, he can't bury it. He'll destroy me. Clara heard the tremor in her own voice and hated it. Whatever I have left of a name, it'll be gone. Possibly. Adrian didn't soften it. Or you become the woman who stood up to corruption, who refused to be silenced. It depends on how we frame it. And if we're wrong, if the evidence isn't enough, then we both fall. Adrian met her eyes. I won't lie to you, Clara. This is risk, real risk. Thomas has connections I don't. Money that talks louder than truth sometimes. But we have facts, documentation, numbers that don't lie. Clara thought of Millbrook, of Dr. Grayson treating a child's fever yesterday, medicine on the shelves because she and Adrian had put it there, of Mrs. Garrett's relieved smile, of 40,000 pounds stolen from people who couldn't afford to lose a penny. I'm in, she said. You're certain? No. The honesty surprised her. I'm terrified, but I'm in anyway. Something flickered in Adrian's expression. Respect, maybe. A recognition of a gamble he understood too well. Then we prepare, he said. And we do this right. The next 3 days blurred into frantic preparation. Adrian's solicitor arrived with additional documentation. They rehearsed how to present the evidence, not as accusation, but as fact, simple and irrefutable. Clara practiced speaking calmly, evenly, even as her heart raced with anger. Don't let him make you emotional, Adrian coached. That's what he'll try. He'll paint you as unstable, vindictive. You have to be colder than he is. I don't know if I can. You can. Adrian's certainty was absolute. I've watched you. When you're working in Millbrook, organizing supplies, dealing with problems, you're steady, focused. Be that version of yourself. Clara wanted to believe him, but the version of herself in Millbrook didn't have to face Thomas Ashford across a ballroom while half of London society watched. Mrs. Brennan appeared with dresses for Clara's consideration, borrowed from Adrian's late sister's wardrobe again, altered to fit. Clara chose the simplest, midnight blue silk, high-necked, severe. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Thin, pale, but her eyes were harder than they'd been 6 weeks ago. You look like you're going to war, Mrs. Brennan observed. I am. The housekeeper's expression softened. Then wear it well, miss. Saturday arrived cold and clear. The carriage ride to Ashford Manor took 2 hours, time Clara spent in silence while Adrian reviewed documents one final time. She watched the countryside roll past and tried to calm her breathing. Second thoughts? Adrian asked without looking up. 100th thoughts. That's normal. Is it? Clara turned to face him. Do you do this often? Publicly destroy people? Adrian finally met her eyes. I've done it twice before, both times necessary, both times bloody. He paused. It doesn't get easier, but that doesn't make it wrong. Who were they, the other two? A business partner who'd been embezzling from widows' pensions, and a magistrate taking bribes to rule against the poor. Adrian's voice went flat. The business partner killed himself. The magistrate fled to France. I don't regret either outcome, but I remember them. Clara absorbed that. Do you think Thomas will run? No, he's too proud. He'll fight. The carriage turned through iron gates, and Ashford Manor came into view. It was larger than Blackmore Estate, newer, designed to impress rather than endure. Light blazed from every window. Carriages lined the curved drive, depositing guests in glittering evening wear. Clara's stomach clenched. We can still leave, Adrian said quietly. No. Clara straightened her spine. We can't. They descended from the carriage into a world of wealth and whispers. Clara felt eyes on her immediately, recognition, shock, avid curiosity. She kept her chin up and her hand steady on Adrian's arm as they climbed the steps. Thomas was greeting guests in the entrance hall, Eleanor beside him in cream silk and diamonds. His smile froze when he saw Clara. "Duke Northmere," he said smoothly, recovering. "How good of you to come. And Miss Whitlock, what a surprise." "Is it?" Clara kept her voice level. "Your invitation seemed quite deliberate." Eleanor's eyes widened slightly. Thomas's smile sharpened. "Of course, any friend of the Duke's is welcome." He gestured toward the ballroom. "Please, enjoy the evening. We'll be making remarks about our charitable initiatives shortly. I'm sure they'll be illuminating," Adrian said with perfect blandness. They moved past into the ballroom, and Clara felt Thomas's gaze boring into her back. Around them, conversation bubbled and swirled. She caught fragments. Thought she'd left the country. Shameless, really, showing her face. Northmere's protecting her, apparently. Adrian's hand covered hers briefly. "Ignore them." Hard to ignore being the scandal of the season. "You won't be. Not after tonight." Clara wanted to believe him. But looking around at the glittering crowd, at the wealth and power concentrated in this one room, she felt very small. Very alone despite Adrian beside her. A woman approached. Older, expensively dressed, diamonds at her throat. Lady Pemberton, Clara remembered. One of London's most influential hostesses. "Miss Whitlock," she said, her tone making the name sound like an accusation. "I'm astonished to see you here." "Are you—" Clara met her eyes. "Why?" Lady Pemberton blinked. "Well, given the circumstances, the broken engagement, the rumors." "What rumors specifically?" Clara kept her voice pleasant. "I'd like to know which ones you believe." That's hardly... Because I've heard I'm unstable, vindictive, unable to accept rejection. Are those the rumors you mean?" Lady Pemberton's face flushed. "Miss Whitlock, I don't think..." "Or perhaps you've heard other versions. That I'm a thief, perhaps. That I mismanaged charitable funds. Though I notice those particular rumors are quieter, less socially acceptable." "Clara," Adrian murmured. She knew she should stop. This wasn't the plan. But 6 weeks of silence, of swallowed rage, of watching Thomas smile while people died, it came pouring out. "The truth, Clara said clearly, is that I trusted the wrong person. I believed in someone who was stealing from the vulnerable. And when I realized what was happening, I ran. That was my mistake. Not the trust, the running." Lady Pemberton stared. Around them, conversations had stilled. People were listening. "But I'm done running now," Clara finished. "So if you have questions about me, Lady Pemberton, ask them directly. I'm tired of rumors." The older woman opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and walked away stiffly. The whispers exploded. Adrian leaned close. "That was unplanned. I know. I'm sorry." "Don't be." His voice held something that might have been amusement. "You just took control of the narrative. Now they're curious instead of dismissive." Clara's hands were shaking. She pressed them together, hard. "I think I needs air." "Terrace. Through those doors." She escaped gratefully, pushing through glass doors onto a stone terrace overlooking formal gardens. The cold hit her like a slap, but she welcomed it, breathed it in, tried to steady herself. Behind her, the door opened. Clara tensed, expecting Adrian, but the voice that spoke was Thomas's. Quite a performance. She turned slowly. He stood backlit by the ballroom, hands in his pockets, looking relaxed. But Clara could see the tension in his shoulders. "Not a performance," she said. "Truth. Your truth." Thomas stepped closer. "Which isn't the same as fact. It is when I have evidence." "Evidence?" He laughed. "Clara, you don't have evidence. You have grief and resentment and a duke who finds you a convenient cause. Is that what you're telling yourself?" Thomas's expression hardened. "I'm telling myself you're making a terrible mistake. Whatever you think you know, whatever Northmere's convinced you of, it won't stand up. I have lawyers, witnesses, documentation of every penny I've handled. Forged documentation. Yup. Prove it." Thomas was close now, close enough she could smell his cologne, the same scent he'd worn when they were engaged. It made her sick, You can't. You're desperate and damaged, and you're going to humiliate yourself publicly. Clara forced herself to hold his gaze. Why did you invite Adrian here if you're so confident? To show him and you that I'm untouchable, that this crusade of yours is pointless. Thomas smiled. Also, I thought it would be entertaining, watching you squirm. It. You stole from the poor. I redirected inefficient charity into sustainable investments. People died. People die, Clara. That's not my responsibility or yours. He reached out as if to touch her face. She jerked back. You were always too soft, too emotional. That's why we would never have worked. No, Claire's voice came out steady. We wouldn't have worked because you're a thief and a liar, and I was too naive to see it. Thomas's hand dropped. His smile vanished. Last chance, he said quietly. Walk away now. Leave London. I'll even help you financially. Set you up somewhere quiet, where you can live out your life in peace. But if you stay, if you try to make this accusation public, I will destroy you. Completely. Do you understand? Clara thought of the dispensary, of Dr. Grayson's steady hands and Mrs. Garrett's grateful tears, of £40,000 and all the lives that money could have saved. I understand, she said, and my answer is no. Thomas stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharp and final. Your funeral, he said, and walked back inside. Clara stood alone on the terrace, her breath misting in the cold air, her heart hammering. She'd just burned her last bridge. There was no retreat now. Good. She didn't want retreat. She wanted justice. When she went back inside, Adrian was waiting near the doors. He took one look at her face and asked, What happened? Thomas offered me exile and money to disappear. And? I told him no. Adrian's expression shifted. Then it's truly war now. It was always war. I just finally admitted it. A gong sounded, 3 clear notes. The crowd began moving toward the front of the ballroom, where a small platform had been erected. Thomas and Eleanor mounted it, smiling graciously. Ladies and gentlemen, Thomas began, his voice carrying easily. Thank you all for coming tonight. As you know, this gala benefits medical initiatives in our rural communities. Work that's desperately needed and, I'm proud to say, making real difference. Clara's nails bit into her palms. Adrian touched her elbow gently. We've raised over £15,000 this season, Thomas continued. Money that will provide medicine, care, hope to those who need it most. It's a privilege to serve, and I'm grateful to everyone who's contributed. Applause rippled through the room. Clara felt bile rise in her throat. However, Thomas said, his tone shifting, I must address a difficult matter. There have been certain accusations, suggestions that funds have been mismanaged, that charitable work has been compromised. The room went very quiet. I want to be clear, Thomas said gravely. These accusations are false, hurtful, born from personal grievance rather than fact. But I understand why they've gained traction. When charitable work is involved, we must be above reproach. He pulled papers from his jacket pocket. Therefore, I've had independent auditors review all accounts, every penny. And I'm pleased to present their findings. Complete transparency, full accountability, 0 discrepancies. He held up the papers. Clara's stomach dropped. Adrian's hand tightened on her arm. Forgeries, he breathed. Has to be. But no one will check, Clara whispered back. They'll just believe him. Thomas was still speaking. I hope this puts to rest any concerns. Charity work is too important to be undermined by, may I see those documents? Adrian's voice cut through the ballroom like a knife. Every head turned. Thomas's smile flickered. I beg your pardon. The audit findings. Adrian moved forward, the crowd parting before him. I'd like to examine them. For transparency's sake, Duke Northmere, I assure you, then you won't mind sharing them, publicly. So the tension in the room was suffocating. Thomas's jaw clenched, but he was trapped. Refusing would look guilty. Slowly, he held out the papers. Adrian took them, scanned them. His expression never changed, but Clara saw his eyes narrow. These are dated last week, Adrian said. Remarkable turnaround time for a comprehensive audit. We were thorough and efficient. Thorough. Adrian looked up. Tell me, did your auditors examine the original account ledgers, or just the summaries you provided? The complete records, naturally, including matched government grants? Thomas hesitated, just a fraction of a second. But Clara saw it. So did Adrian. Of course, Thomas said. Interesting. Adrian handed the papers back. Because those government records are sealed, the only way to access them is through official Treasury request, which takes months, not days. The murmuring started. Thomas's smile was rigid now. I don't appreciate the insinuation. I'm not insinuating anything. I'm stating facts. Adrian's voice remained level, deadly. You claim transparency while presenting documents that couldn't possibly contain the information you say they do. That's not transparency. That's theater. How dare you? I dare because I have actual evidence. Adrian gestured, and his solicitor appeared from the crowd, carrying a leather case. Complete transaction records, correspondence, documentation of diverted funds, not from rushed audits, but from months of investigation. The room erupted. Thomas went white. You have no right. I have every right, as does Miss Whitlock, whose name you've used as cover for theft. Clara felt every eye in the room swing to her. Her throat closed. This was it, the moment they'd planned for. But standing here, exposed under the chandeliers with hundreds of people staring, she couldn't breathe. Adrian looked at her. Steady, certain. She stepped forward. Thomas Ashford stole from charitable accounts, she said. Her voice shook. She forced it stronger. Including accounts I personally funded. He diverted money meant for the poor, the sick, the dying, and he used my work as cover. That's a lie, Thomas shouted. You're unstable. Everyone knows. Everyone knows you broke our engagement and started rumors about me. Clara's voice cut through his. What everyone doesn't know is why. It's because I was getting too close to discovering what you'd done. Because I started asking questions about disbursements, about where the money was actually going. Prove it. We can. Adrian opened the leather case. Transaction by transaction, forged signatures on grant applications, correspondence between you and 3 associates outlining how to maximize profit from charitable giving. It's all here. He began distributing documents to the crowd. People grabbed them, reading, gasping. Clara saw shock, horror, anger spreading like fire. Thomas looked at Eleanor. She stared back, her face frozen. Eleanor, he said, you know this is insane. Tell them. Eleanor stepped away from him. I don't know anything, she said quietly. Apparently. Thomas's composure cracked. You're all believing this? Her? She's been staying with Northmere for weeks. Who knows what he's convinced her of? What I convinced her of, Adrian said coldly, is that she deserved justice. That silence in the face of corruption is complicity. That's all. Justice! Thomas laughed wildly. This is a vendetta. She couldn't handle rejection, so she's invented— I have the money trail, Adrian interrupted. Your accounts? The shell companies you used? The forged grant applications with Clara's signature. Badly forged, I might add. Your handwriting expert wasn't very good. The room spun. Clara gripped the edge of a table to steady herself. Thomas was still talking, still denying, but no one was listening anymore. People were reading the documents, comparing notes, whispering furiously. Lady Pemberton looked horrified. Other faces showed disgust, anger, betrayal. The narrative was shifting, right here, right now. And then someone else stepped forward, a man Clara didn't recognize, middle-aged and expensively dressed. I funded one of those grants, he said loudly. £5,000 for medical supplies in Millbrook. Are you telling me that money never arrived? It did, Thomas started. No, Clara said. It didn't. The dispensary closed 3 months ago. No supplies, no funding, nothing. The man's face went purple. I want my money back, immediately. And I want answers. Another voice. A woman in emerald silk. I donated to your rural initiative last year. Where did that money go? The crowd turned on Thomas like a wave. Questions, accusations, demands. He backed up, hands raised, still trying to explain, to deflect, to charm his way out. But it was over. Clara saw the moment he realized it, saw his face change from defiance to calculation. His eyes swept the room, landing on the doors. "Don't," Adrian said quietly. Thomas ran. He bolted for the terrace doors, shoving through the crowd. People shouted. Someone tried to grab him. He broke free, disappeared into the night. "Let him go," Adrian said as several men started to follow. "He won't get far. Not with this public. Not with these witnesses." He was right. Thomas's reputation was destroyed, his career ruined. Running just made him look more guilty. Clara stood in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by chaos, and felt something break open inside her chest. Not relief, not quite, but something close. The weight of silence, of complicity, of shame. It lifted. She'd spoken, she'd stood, and she'd won. Adrian appeared at her side. "We should go." "Not yet." Clara's voice surprised her with its steadiness. "I want to talk to them, the donors, the people who were stolen from. They deserve answers." "Clara, please." Adrian studied her face, then nodded. "All right, but I'm staying with you." They spent the next hour in the ballroom, Clara answering questions, Adrian providing documentation. People who'd ignored her, whispered about her, judged her. Now they listened. Some apologized. Others just looked sick. Lady Pemberton approached near the end. "I owe you an apology, Miss Whitlock." "Yes," Clara said. "You do." The older woman flinched. "I believed the rumors. I should have known better." "Why should you have?" "You didn't know me, but I should have asked, should have questioned." Lady Pemberton's voice was quiet. "I'm sorry, truly." Clara wanted to hold on to anger, but she was too tired. "Thank you." When they finally left Ashford Manor, it was past midnight. The carriage ride back was silent until they'd cleared the gates. Then Clara started shaking. "It's the shock," Adrian said. "Perfectly normal. I confronted him in front of everyone." "You did, Shchab." "I didn't think I could." "I did." Adrian's voice was certain. "You're stronger than you believe." Clara laughed shakily. "I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm going to be sick." "Also normal." They rode in silence for a while. Clara stared out at the dark countryside and tried to process what had just happened. Thomas, exposed. Her name clearing. Justice or the beginning of it. "What happens now?" she asked. "Legal proceedings. Probably criminal charges given the Crown funds involved. Recovery of whatever money can be found." Adrian paused. "And you decide what comes next, for yourself." "What do you mean?" "You're free now, Clara. The truth is out. Your reputation will recover. You can go back to London. Resume your life." Something cold settled in Clara's stomach. "Is that what you want? For me to leave?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "What I want," he said finally, "is irrelevant. This is about what you need." "That's not an answer." "No, it's not." Clara turned to look at him in the darkness. His face was shadowed, unreadable, but she thought she saw something in his eyes. Something careful and guarded, and almost vulnerable. "I don't want to go back to London," she said. "Then don't. But I can't stay at Blackmore Estate forever, hiding." "You're not hiding anymore." Adrian's voice was soft. "You faced them tonight. You won. Whatever you do next, it's not hiding." Clara thought of Millbrook, of the work still needed there and in other villages, of everything they'd started together. "I want to keep working," she said. "On the dispensaries, the medical initiatives. Make them real and lasting. Then we'll do that." "We?" Adrian met her eyes. "If you'll have a partner." Clara's breath caught. "A partner. Someone who understands the work. Who won't steal or undermine or use you." Adrian's voice was measured, careful. "Someone who trusts you to make your own decisions, even the difficult ones." Clara felt something shift in her chest. A warmth spreading through the cold. "I'd like that." "Good." Adrian looked away, but not before Clara saw the relief in his expression. "Then we'll figure out the rest as we go." The carriage rolled on through the darkness, carrying them toward Blackmore Estate, toward uncertain futures and difficult work, and a partnership neither of them had expected. But for the first time in years, Clara felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope, real and solid and earned. Whatever came next, she'd face it standing. No more running, no more silence. Just truth and work and a man beside her who'd taught her that strength wasn't perfection. It was choosing to fight even when you were terrified. And tonight, she'd done exactly that. The victory lasted 3 days. On the fourth morning, Clara woke to shouting in the courtyard. She threw on a dressing gown and ran downstairs to find Adrian in the entrance hall, his face carved from stone, holding a newspaper. "What's happened?" He handed it to her without speaking. The headline screamed across the front page. "Duke's mistress fabricates charity scandal. Ashford produces counter-evidence, calls for defamation charges." Clara's vision blurred. She forced herself to read. Sources close to Mr. Thomas Ashford reveal that documents presented at Saturday's gala were sophisticated forgeries created by Miss Clara Whitlock and her paramour, the Duke of Northmere, in an elaborate scheme to destroy Mr. Ashford's reputation. Handwriting experts have analyzed the so-called evidence and determined conclusively that Miss Whitlock herself created the incriminating correspondence. "No," Clara whispered. We didn't. "I know." Adrian's voice was tight. "Keep reading." Mr. Ashford, who has cooperated fully with authorities, presents a tragic picture of a man betrayed twice, first by a mentally unstable fiancé, now by her wealthy protector. "I harbor no ill will toward Miss Whitlock," he stated. "She is clearly unwell and has been manipulated by someone with far more resources and far less conscience than she possesses." Clara's hands shook so badly the paper rattled. "He's turned it around completely." "He's trying to." Adrian took the paper back, his jaw clenched. 3 other publications ran similar stories this morning, all citing the same anonymous sources, all carrying the same narrative. "How is this possible? We had proof. Witnesses saw us present documents. They didn't verify them independently." Adrian crumpled the newspaper in his fist. "Thomas has had 3 days to prepare, to buy experts, to plant stories, to turn public opinion. Clara felt the room tilt. "The donors at the gala, they believed us." "Some did. Others are now questioning." Lady Pemberton sent a note this morning withdrawing her apology. Adrian's voice went flat. "She's concerned about being associated with a scandal of uncertain veracity." "Uncertain?" Clara couldn't breathe. "We showed them everything. And Thomas is claiming everything was forged, that I'm using you to settle a business grudge against him." Adrian moved to the window, his shoulders rigid. "He's even produced documents showing I tried to buy into one of his ventures last year and was refused, claims this is retaliation." "Is that true? Did you try to invest with him?" "Yes, but it had nothing to do with this." Adrian turned back. "The timing is coincidental, but he's making it look premeditated." Clara sank into a chair, the dressing gown pooling around her. 3 days ago, she'd stood in that ballroom feeling strong, vindicated. Now the ground was crumbling beneath her again. "What do we do?" "We fight back, release our own statements, bring in independent verification of the documents. Will anyone listen?" Adrian's silence was answer enough. The door burst open and Mrs. Brennan rushed in, her usual composure shattered. "Your Grace, there are men at the gates, reporters. They're demanding to speak with Miss Whitlock." "Tell them she's unavailable," Adrian said sharply. "I did. They're not leaving. They're shouting questions. One of them tried to climb the wall." Clara stood. "I'll talk to them." "Absolutely not." "Why? They already think I'm lying. Hiding will only make it worse." "Clara, I'm not hiding anymore, remember?" She moved toward the door. Adrian caught her arm. "If you go out there, they'll twist everything you say. Make you look desperate or guilty or both. Then I'll give them nothing to twist. Just facts." Adrian's grip tightened. "You're not ready for this. Not yet." Something hot flared in Clara's chest. "You don't get to decide what I'm ready for. I'm trying to protect you." "I don't need protection. I need support. There's a difference." They stared at each other, tension crackling between them. Finally, Adrian released her arm. "Fine, but I'm coming with you." "No." Clara's voice was firm. "This is mine to handle." She walked out before he could argue, through the entrance hall and down the front steps. The reporters surged against the gates like a wave, shouting over each other. "Miss Whitlock, is it true you're the Duke's mistress? Did you forge the documents? How much did Northmere pay you?" Clara stopped at the base of the steps, her bare feet cold on the stone. She waited until they quieted. "I forged nothing," she said clearly. "The evidence we presented is real. Thomas Ashford stole from charitable accounts. That is fact, not fabrication. Then why are experts calling your documents fake? Because Thomas bought those experts, just like he's buying these stories. You have proof of that? Yeah. Do you have proof I fabricated anything? Or are you just printing what you're told?" One reporter, a thin man with ink-stained fingers, pushed forward. "Miss Whitlock, you were engaged to Mr. Ashford." He broke it off. "Isn't this just revenge?" "If I wanted revenge, I'd have done this 2 years ago." Clara kept her voice steady. "I stayed silent then. I only spoke when I discovered people were dying because money meant for their care was being stolen. Convenient timing, though, isn't it? You take up with a duke, suddenly you have resources to attack your ex-fiancé. I'm not with the duke. He's helping me expose corruption. That's all." "From his estate? Where you've been living for weeks?" Clara felt heat rise in her face. "I needed somewhere safe while we compiled evidence. The Duke offered sanctuary. That doesn't make me his mistress." "But you're a single woman living unchaperoned with a single man. I'm a woman trying to stop a thief. My living arrangements are irrelevant." "Society doesn't think so," another reporter called. "Half of London is calling you a fallen woman. The other half thinks you're a liar. What do you say to that?" Clara looked at the sea of faces, at the notebooks and pencils poised to record her every word. Thought of Lady Pemberton's withdrawn apology. Of donors second-guessing what they'd seen with their own eyes. Of Thomas, somewhere, smiling at how easily he'd turned the narrative. "I say I don't care what London thinks," she said quietly. "I care about the truth, and I care about people who need medicine and can't get it because their money was stolen. That's what matters. Not my reputation or Thomas Ashford's or anyone else's." She turned and walked back inside before they could ask more questions. Adrian was waiting in the hall, his expression unreadable. That was reckless. Probably. Clara brushed past him. But it was honest. Honesty doesn't win wars. No. But lies don't either. Not permanently. She climbed the stairs before he could respond, her heart pounding, her hands still shaking. In her room, she sank onto the bed and let the tremors take over. She'd just made everything worse. By afternoon, the papers had printed her quotes. They'd also printed analysis from society matrons calling her brazen, from legal experts suggesting she could face charges, from Thomas's supporters painting her as a scorned woman willing to destroy an innocent man. Clara read them all, each word a fresh cut, until Adrian physically took the newspapers away. "Stop torturing yourself. I need to know what they're saying. You need to focus on what we're doing next." He dropped the papers in the fireplace and lit them, which is proving those documents are genuine. How? If the experts Thomas hired say they're fake, then we find better experts. Ones with actual credibility who can't be bought. Where? Adrian was quiet for a moment. "There's a man, Professor Aldridge. He's the foremost handwriting analyst in England, maybe in Europe. If anyone can verify the authenticity, it's him." "Will he help us?" "I don't know. He's notoriously difficult. Doesn't take just anyone's money." "Then what makes him take a case?" "The truth. If he believes there's actual deception to uncover, he'll pursue it relentlessly." Adrian met her eyes. "But if he thinks we're the ones lying, he'll say so publicly. It's a risk." Clara thought of Millbrook, of the dispensary they'd rebuilt, of people finally starting to trust again. "Do it," she said. "Contact him." Professor Marcus Aldridge arrived 2 days later, a compact man in his 60s with wire-rimmed spectacles and ink-stained fingers. He refused refreshment, ignored pleasantries, and went straight to Adrian's study to examine the documents. He spent 8 hours locked in that room. Clara paced the library, unable to focus on anything. Adrian worked through correspondence, but she saw him glance at the clock every few minutes. Finally, at dusk, Aldridge emerged. "Well?" Adrian asked. The professor removed his spectacles and cleaned them methodically. "The correspondence is genuine, written by multiple hands over several months. The signature forgeries on the grant applications are crude, clearly not done by Miss Whitlock, whose actual handwriting is far more refined. Clara's knees nearly gave out. You can prove that? Yes. I can testify to it under oath, yes. And I will. Aldridge replaced his spectacles. I can also testify that the experts Thomas Ashford hired are charlatans. One of them was disbarred from court testimony 5 years ago for accepting bribes. The other has no formal training whatsoever, just a letterhead and an impressive-sounding title. Can you go public with this? Adrian asked. I intend to. This kind of deception offends me professionally. Aldridge's voice was clipped. I'll provide a full report to the newspapers and to the authorities. If Mr. Ashford has committed fraud, I want to see him prosecuted. Clara felt tears sting her eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because someone tried to use my field to perpetuate a lie. Aldridge gathered his materials. I'll have the report ready tomorrow. He left. Clara sank into a chair, shaking with relief. It's not over, Adrian warned. Thomas will fight back again, find new angles. I know, but it's something. It's proof we're not lying. Yes. Adrian's voice softened slightly. It is. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind churning with everything that had happened. The gala. The newspapers. Aldridge's verification. And beneath it all, a question she'd been avoiding. What happened after this was over? She told Adrian she wanted to keep working on the medical initiatives. He'd agreed to partner with her. But what did that mean exactly? How long would she stay at Blackmore Estate? When would she have to leave? And why did the thought of leaving make her chest ache? A soft knock at her door. Clara sat up. Come in. Adrian entered, still dressed, a folded paper in his hand. His face was grim. What is it? This arrived by urgent courier an hour ago. He handed her the paper. It's from Millbrook. Clara unfolded it with shaking hands. The writing was Mrs. Garrett's, hurried, blotted with what might have been tears. Miss Whitlock, please come quickly. Men came today claiming the dispensary is operating illegally. They've confiscated our supplies, doctor. Grayson was threatened with arrest if he continues treating patients without proper authorization. We don't know what to do. Please help. Clara's blood went cold. When did this arrive? 20 minutes ago. I came as soon as I read it. We have to go. Now. Clara, it's midnight. The roads... I don't care. She was already moving, pulling on clothes over her nightgown. Those people trusted us. If something happens because we weren't there, getting yourself killed on dark roads won't help them. Clara spun to face him. Then what do you suggest? We wait until morning while they confiscate everything we work to provide? Adrian's jaw clenched. We go, but carefully, with armed escorts. Fine. Whatever. Just hurry. They made the journey in tense silence, the carriage flanked by 2 of Adrian's men on horseback. The roads were treacherous in the dark, muddy from recent rain. Twice they nearly lost a wheel in ruts. Clara gripped the seat and willed them to move faster. They reached Millbrook just after 2 in the morning. The village was dark except for lights at the dispensary, and a cluster of men in official-looking coats standing guard outside. The carriage stopped. Adrian stepped out first, positioning himself between Clara and the men. What's going on here? He demanded. One of the men stepped forward, middle-aged, officious, a badge on his coat identifying him as some kind of inspector. This facility is operating without proper medical licensing. We're shutting it down pending investigation. On whose authority? The Regional Health Commission. The inspector pulled out documents. We received complaints about unlicensed practice, unverified medicines, potential harm to patients. It's our duty to investigate. Convenient timing, Adrian said coldly. This dispensary has been operating for weeks without complaint. That doesn't make it legal. Clara pushed past Adrian. Where's Dr. Grayson? And Mrs. Garrett? Inside, under supervision. They're not criminals. That will be determined by the investigation. The inspector's voice was flat. Now I suggest you leave before I add obstruction to the list of violations. You can't do this. Clara's voice rose. People depend on this place. They'll die without access to medicine. Then they should go to a properly licensed facility. The nearest one is 12 miles away. Most of them can't afford the journey. Not my concern. Something snapped inside Clara. She tried to push past the inspector toward the door. He blocked her. Adrian grabbed her arm, pulling her back. Clara, don't! Let me go! Making this a physical confrontation won't help, Bess. Clara jerked free, breathing hard. The inspector watched with cold satisfaction. I can arrest you for assault if you try that again, miss. Arrest me then. At least in jail I won't have to watch people suffer. Clara. Adrian's voice cut through her rage. Look! He pointed past the dispensary. Clara turned and felt her heart stop. The villagers were coming. Dozens of them, emerging from houses with lamps and candles. Men, women, children. Some she recognized from her visits. Others were strangers. But they all moved toward the dispensary with the same grim determination. The old man whose wife had died was at the front. He stopped a few feet from the inspector. You're closing our dispensary, he said. Not a question. It's operating illegally. It's keeping us alive. The old man's voice was steady. My neighbor's alive, my grandchildren alive, and you're taking it away. I'm enforcing the law? Whose law? The law that says only rich people deserve medicine? More villagers crowded closer. The inspector's men shifted nervously, hands moving to weapons. Disperse, the inspector ordered. This is official business. This is our business, a woman called. Our health, our lives. I'm warning you. We're not leaving. The old man planted his walking stick. You want to shut this place down? You'll have to go through all of us. The tension crackled. Clara saw the inspector calculating, weighing the optics of attacking unarmed villagers against his orders. This is Thomas, Clara said suddenly. Isn't it? He sent you. The inspector's face flickered. I don't know what. You do. This is retaliation. He can't discredit the evidence, so he's destroying the work we've done, proving he has power we don't. You're paranoid, miss. Am I? Then show me the complaint that started this investigation. Who filed it? The inspector's silence was answer enough. Clara turned to Adrian. He won't show us because it came from Thomas or his associates. This whole thing is fabricated. Even if that's true, Adrian said quietly, they still have legal authority. We can't fight this with force. Then how do we fight it? Adrian looked at the crowd of villagers, at the inspector's nervous men, at the dispensary with its locked doors. His expression hardened with decision. We don't fight it, he said. We expose it. He turned to the inspector. Fine. Shut it down. But I'm bringing the press. Every newspaper in London. Let's see how this looks when it's public. Officials confiscating medicine from the poor in the middle of the night, on orders from a man facing fraud charges. The inspector paled. You can't. I can. I will. Unless you're willing to wait for proper daylight investigation with witnesses present. Your choice. The standoff stretched. Clara held her breath. Finally, the inspector stepped back. Fine. We'll return at dawn for proper inspection with legal observers. Good. We'll be waiting. The inspector and his men retreated to their horses. Within minutes, they disappeared into the darkness. The villagers cheered. Mrs. Garrett emerged from the dispensary, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Grayson looked shaken but relieved. Clara wanted to celebrate, but all she felt was exhaustion and a creeping dread. This isn't over, she said to Adrian. No, it's just starting. He was right. By morning, word had spread. More officials arrived, some legitimate, some clearly bought. Reporters came too, though whether they'd been sent by Adrian or Thomas was unclear. The dispensary became the center of a legal and public relations battle that Clara didn't fully understand. Adrian handled most of it, his lawyers filing motions, his contacts in government making calls. But Clara felt herself being pushed to the sidelines, her voice drowned out by men in expensive suits arguing legal technicalities. On the third day of the standoff, she snapped. This is ridiculous, she said, interrupting a meeting between Adrian and his solicitor. We're arguing about licensing and permits while people are suffering. Clara, we have to work within the system. The system is broken. It's designed to keep people like Thomas in power and people like me silent, which is why we're using legal channels to... I don't care about legal channels. Her voice rose. I care about the old man who can't walk 12 miles for medicine. I care about the mother whose child has fever and no way to treat it. They don't need lawyers. They need help. Adrian's solicitor cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we should continue this later. No. Clara turned on him. You're going to continue it now, with actual solutions instead of bureaucratic delays. Miss Whitlock, I understand your frustration, but do you? When's the last time you couldn't afford a physician? When's the last time you watched someone die because they were too poor to matter? Clara! Adrian's voice was sharp. That's enough. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, nothing I say is enough. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a duke, I'm just a woman who trusted the wrong person, and apparently that makes everything I do suspect. She stormed out before Adrian could respond. Outside, she found herself at the edge of the estate gardens, breathing hard, tears of frustration burning her eyes. She'd done everything right. Gathered evidence, confronted Thomas publicly, brought in experts, and he was still winning. Footsteps behind her, she didn't turn. I'm sorry, Adrian said quietly. You're right. We're so focused on legal battles that we're forgetting what matters. I don't know what to do anymore, Claire admitted. Every time we gain ground, Thomas finds a way to undermine it. The newspapers, the dispensary. What's next? I don't know. That's not reassuring. I'm not trying to reassure you. I'm being honest. Adrian moved to stand beside her. Thomas is more entrenched than I realized, more willing to burn everything down rather than admit guilt. So we've lost. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Clara finally looked at him. We can't win this, can we? Not really. Even if we prove everything, even if he's arrested, he'll still have power, still have influence, and I'll still be the unstable woman who accused him. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Probably, he said finally. The honesty hurt more than comfort would have. Then what's the point? Clara asked. Why keep fighting? Because the alternative is letting him win completely, letting corruption go unpunished, letting people suffer because speaking up is too hard. That's not enough. No, Adrian agreed. It's not. But it's what we have. Clara stared out at the gardens, at the careful order Adrian had created from wilderness, thought about what she'd learned in the last 2 months. That truth didn't automatically win. That being right didn't mean being believed. That justice was a fight, not a given. And she thought about what Thomas had said on the terrace at the gala. Your funeral. Maybe it would be. Maybe standing up to him would cost her everything. Reputation, future, the fragile life she'd started rebuilding here. But what was the alternative? Go back to silence? Let him keep stealing, keep lying, keep destroying? She'd already tried that. For 2 years she'd been quiet. And people had died. I need to go to London, Clara said suddenly. Adrian turned sharply. What? London. I need to face this directly, not through lawyers or newspapers or proxy battles. Me, him, the truth. Clara, that's exactly what he wants. To get you alone where he can manipulate. I'm not planning to be alone. I'm planning to be very, very public. She turned to face him fully, an idea crystallizing. Thomas is using his money and influence to control the narrative. So I'll use the one thing he can't control, which is my voice, my story, my willingness to keep speaking no matter how much it costs me. Clara felt certainty hardening inside her. I'm going to every newspaper that will listen, every society matron who will receive me, every donor who gave to Thomas's fake charity, and I'm going to tell them the truth over and over until they can't ignore it anymore. That's suicide. You'll be torn apart. Probably, but at least I'll be fighting. Clara met his eyes. I'm done hiding behind your protection, Adrian. I'm grateful for everything you've done, but this is my battle. I need to fight it myself. Adrian's jaw clenched. You're not ready. And there it was. The same patronizing certainty that every man in her life had shown. Thomas, her father, even Adrian, who she'd thought was different. You don't get to decide that, Clara said quietly. Not anymore. I'm trying to keep you safe. I don't want safe. I want justice. And if you can't tell the difference, then maybe I've been wrong about you. The words hung between them, sharp and cutting. Adrian's face went blank. I see, he said. Then I won't stand in your way. He walked back toward the house, his spine rigid. Clara watched him go and felt something crack in her chest, but she didn't call him back. She packed that night. Not much. She'd arrived with nothing, and most of what she wore belonged to a dead woman anyway. By dawn, she'd be gone. Mrs. Brennan found her as she was closing her valise. You're leaving? Yes. Does His Grace know? He knows I'm going to London. That's all he needs to know. Mrs. Brennan was quiet for a moment. He cares for you, you realize, more than is wise. Clara's throat tightened. That's not my responsibility. No, but it might be your loss. Before Clara could respond, the housekeeper left. She finished packing and carried her bag downstairs. The house was silent, gray pre-dawn light filtering through windows. She'd arranged for a carriage to the nearest coaching inn. From there, she'd take public transport to London. She was halfway to the door when she saw it. An envelope on the hall table, her name in Adrian's precise handwriting. Clara hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a bank draft for £500 and a single sentence. For your work, not for you to be in debt to me. Clara's vision blurred. She folded the note carefully and slipped it into her pocket. The carriage was waiting. She climbed in without looking back. London greeted her with cold rain and colder stares. She took a room at a modest boarding house and began her campaign. The first newspaper refused to see her. So did the second and third. The fourth, a smaller publication known for muckraking, agreed to meet. The editor was a hard-faced woman named Phyllis Grant, who chain-smoked and looked at Clara like she was evaluating livestock. So you're the mistress? I'm not anyone's mistress. That's not what the papers say. The papers are wrong. About a lot of things. Phyllis leaned back in her chair. Why should I believe you over Thomas Ashford? He's got money, connections, a spotless reputation. You've got what exactly? The truth. Everyone says that. Clara pulled out her documentation, copies of everything she and Adrian had compiled. Transaction records, correspondence, Professor Aldridge's report. Read these, she said. Then decide. Phyllis spent 20 minutes reviewing the documents, her expression unreadable. Finally, she stubbed out her cigarette. This is solid. If it's real. It is real. Aldridge verified it. Yeah. So you say. Phyllis lit another cigarette. Here's my problem, Miss Whitlock. You give me these documents, I print them, and Ashford sues me into oblivion for defamation. I'm a small operation. I can't afford that fight. But if it's true, truth is a defense in court, but court costs money I don't have. She pushed the documents back across the desk. I'm sorry, I can't help you. Clara felt despair settling in her chest. Then who can? Someone with deeper pockets than mine, or someone who doesn't care about being destroyed. Phyllis shrugged. Good luck finding them. Clara tried 6 more newspapers that day. All refused. Too risky, too controversial, too expensive to verify. By evening, she was exhausted and nearly out of money. The bank draft from Adrian sat heavy in her pocket, but using it felt like admitting defeat. She returned to her boarding house to find a man waiting in the shabby parlor. Middle-aged, expensive coat, careful eyes. Miss Whitlock? Who's asking? My name is James Rothwell, Eleanor's father. Claire's stomach dropped. I have nothing to say to you. That's unfortunate, because I have a great deal to say to you. He gestured to a chair. Please, sit. Clara remained standing. Whatever Thomas told you, Thomas has told me many things, most of them lies, as I've recently discovered. Rothwell's voice was even. My daughter came to me 3 days ago. She's known about the theft for months. Was too afraid to speak. But your confrontation at the gala gave her courage. Claire's breath caught. Eleanor knows? She knows everything. Account numbers, forged documents, the men he bribed. Rothwell pulled an envelope from his coat. She's compiled her own evidence, wants it made public, but she's terrified of Thomas. Won't come forward unless she has protection. Why are you telling me this? Because Eleanor says you're the only person who's been brave enough to stand up to him. And because I want that bastard destroyed for what he's done to my daughter. Rothwell's eyes hardened. So here's my offer. I'll fund your campaign. Pay for lawyers, buy newspaper space, hire security. Whatever you need. In exchange, you ensure Eleanor's testimony is heard and she remains safe. Clara stared at him. You'd do that? For my daughter? Yes. For justice? Also yes. He held out the envelope. These are Eleanor's records. Combined with what you already have, it's unassailable. Clara took the envelope with shaking hands, opened it, saw page after page of Eleanor's careful documentation, dates, amounts, conversations. Things only someone close to Thomas would know. This is incredible. This is damning. Rothwell stood. Do we have an agreement? Clara thought of Adrian, of his careful support and his certainty that she wasn't ready, of the fight they'd had and the way he'd walked away. She thought of herself, standing alone in London with nothing but conviction and a dead woman's dress. And she thought of Millbrook, of people who deserved better than a system designed to crush them. We have an agreement, he said. Rothwell smiled grimly. Good, then let's go to war. Rothwell didn't waste time. Within 24 hours, Clara found herself in a proper London townhouse with security posted at every entrance. Eleanor arrived the following morning, pale and trembling but determined. I should have spoken sooner, she said, gripping a teacup so hard her knuckles went white. When you confronted him at the gala, I wanted to stand with you, but I was too afraid. You're speaking now, Clara said. That's what matters. Eleanor set down the cup. He told me you were unstable, that you'd invented the whole thing out of jealousy. I believed him at first because it was easier than believing I'd agreed to marry a criminal. When did you realize the truth? Gradually. Little things that didn't add up, questions he deflected too smoothly. Then after the gala, I found documents in his study. He'd gotten careless, arrogant. Eleanor's voice hardened. He thought I was too stupid to understand what I was looking at. But you did understand. Every word, every stolen pound. Eleanor met Clara's eyes. I'm ready to testify. In court, in the papers, wherever it's needed. But I need you to promise me something. What? That when this is over, Thomas won't be able to hurt anyone else. Not me, not you, not the people he stole from. Promise me we'll end this completely. Clara thought of all the times she'd wanted to compromise, to find an easier path. Thought of Adrian telling her she wasn't ready. Thought of herself 2 months ago running from a wedding. I promise, she said. The campaign began in earnest. Rothwell bought space in 6 major newspapers and 3 smaller publications. Clara and Eleanor sat for interviews, presenting evidence methodically. Professor Aldridge gave statements. Victims from Millbrook and other communities came forward with testimonies. It was slow work, exhausting work. Every morning brought new attacks from Thomas's allies. Every evening meant reviewing the next day's strategy until Clara's eyes burned. But this time, the tide was shifting. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a government auditor named Margaret Winters, who'd been investigating the grant fraud independently. She appeared at the townhouse on a rainy Thursday with a leather case full of official documents. I can't testify publicly, she said without preamble. Not yet, but I can give you this. She spread the documents across the table. Internal Treasury records showing systematic fraud across multiple charitable programs. Thomas's name appeared repeatedly, but so did 3 other men, his associates, the ones Clara had overheard at the wedding. This is bigger than we thought, Clara breathed. Much bigger. They've been running this scheme for at least 5 years, maybe longer. Winters tapped one document. The total is close to £70,000. Eleanor gasped. Rothwell's face went dark with fury. Can you prove it? Clara asked. I already have, but Treasury moves slowly. Political connections, careful procedures. It could take months before official charges are filed. Winters looked at Clara directly. Unless someone forces their hand, makes it public enough that they can't ignore it. That's what we're trying to do. Then try harder. Winters gathered her documents. I'm risking my career giving you this information. Don't waste it. She left before Clara could thank her. That night, Clara worked until dawn compiling everything into a comprehensive report. Not just Thomas's theft, but the entire network. Names, amounts, dates. A complete picture of systematic corruption. When she finally finished, she sat back and stared at the pages. This was it. This was the weapon they needed. But publishing it meant making enemies of men far more powerful than Thomas. Men with connections in government, in law, in society's highest circles. Clara thought of the dispensary in Millbrook, of Mrs. Garrett's tears and Dr. Grayson's steady hands, of the old man who'd lost his wife. She thought of Eleanor, gathering courage to speak despite her fear. She thought of Adrian, who'd believed her when no one else would. And she made her choice. Publish it, she told Rothwell the next morning. All of it, every name, every detail. You're certain? This will make you a target for some very dangerous people. I'm certain. Rothwell studied her face, then nodded slowly. All right, I'll make the arrangements. The main piece will run in 3 days. That gives us time to coordinate with the other publications for maximum impact. 3 days. Clara felt her stomach clench. That's fast. That's necessary. Word is already leaking. If we wait too long, they'll find ways to suppress it. Rothwell stood. Get some rest, Miss Whitlock. The next week is going to be brutal. But rest wouldn't come. Clara paced her room, mind racing with everything that could go wrong. Thomas could flee the country. His associates could buy their way out. The authorities could refuse to act despite overwhelming evidence. Or worse, they could turn on her. Paint this as a witch hunt. Destroy what remained of her credibility. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. One of the security men. Someone to see you, miss. Says it's urgent. Who? Won't give a name, but he's insistent. Says you'll want to hear what he has to say. Clara's first instinct was refusal, but something in the guard's expression made her curious. Show him to the parlor. I'll be down in a moment. Mwam. She descended the stairs to find a young man waiting, well-dressed but nervous, turning his hat in his hands repeatedly. He looked vaguely familiar. Miss Whitlock, thank you for seeing me. Do I know you? We've never been introduced, but I worked for Thomas Ashford for 3 years as his personal secretary. The young man's voice was tight. My name is David Fletcher. Clara's pulse quickened. Why are you here? Because I'm tired of being complicit in his lies. Fletcher pulled papers from inside his coat. These are copies of his private correspondence, things he'd never let anyone see. Proof of bribery, threats, conspiracy. I've been documenting everything for months, waiting for someone brave enough to use it. He held out the papers. Clara took them with shaking hands. Why now? She asked. Why not before? Because before, no one was fighting back. Everyone who tried either gave up or was crushed. Fletcher met her eyes. But you didn't give up, and you're not being crushed. So maybe this time it'll actually matter. Clara scanned the documents. They were devastating. Thomas discussing bribes with officials, threatening witnesses, planning ways to discredit Clara and Adrian. One letter in particular made her blood run cold. It was dated just 3 days ago, addressed to a man identified only as K. The Whitlock woman is more persistent than anticipated. If she continues to be a problem, more permanent solutions may be necessary. Discuss options at your earliest convenience. Permanent solutions, Clara read aloud. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. He's threatening to kill me. Fletcher nodded grimly. That's why I'm here. I couldn't keep silent anymore. Not when it's gone that far. Does he know you've taken these? Not yet, but he will soon. I left my resignation letter on his desk this morning. Fletcher managed a weak smile. I expect I'll be unemployable after this. You'll be a hero. I'll be a traitor to my class, but I can live with that. He gestured to the papers. Use them. End this. After Fletcher left, Clara sat in the parlor staring at the documents. The evidence kept mounting, wave after wave. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Rothwell found her there an hour later. You look ill. Clara handed him the letter about permanent solutions, watched his face darken as he read. We're moving you, he said immediately. Somewhere safer, with more security. No. Miss Whitlock, this is a death threat. I know what it is. And running would be exactly what Thomas wants. Show him I'm afraid. Give him back control. Clara stood, forcing her voice steady. I'm not running anymore. Clara stood, forcing her voice. We publish everything in 3 days as planned. And we make sure every authority in London knows about this threat, so if something does happen to me, Thomas can't claim innocence. Rothwell looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Clara's expression stopped him. You've changed, he observed, from the woman Eleanor described, the quiet, accommodating fiancée. That woman was a lie, I told myself, Clara said. This is who I actually am. I'm just finally admitting it. The next 3 days passed in a blur of final preparations. Clara gave one last round of interviews. Eleanor confirmed her testimony. Professor Aldridge provided additional analysis. Fletcher's documents were verified and incorporated. And through it all, Clara waited for Thomas to strike. He didn't. The silence was somehow worse than any attack. Clara found herself checking locks, jumping at shadows, barely sleeping. The security guards followed her everywhere, grim-faced and vigilant. On the morning of publication, Clara woke before dawn. She dressed carefully in a simple gray dress, Eleanor's donation, properly fitted this time, and went downstairs to find the first edition already delivered. The headline dominated the front page. Systematic fraud exposed. Ashford Network. Stole thousands from Crown and Charity. Below it, her name and Eleanor's appeared as primary sources. Fletcher was identified as a key witness. The article laid out everything in excruciating detail. Names, numbers, evidence. It was damning, irrefutable, public. Well, Rothwell said, appearing behind her. No going back now. Clara folded the newspaper carefully. Good, he said. By mid-morning, London was in chaos. Other newspapers rushed to confirm the story. Officials scrambled to respond. Society matrons who'd shunned Clara were suddenly desperate for interviews, and Thomas's world began to collapse. The first crack came from his business partners, who issued statements distancing themselves from him. Then his club revoked his membership. His bank froze accounts pending investigation. By afternoon, arrest warrants had been issued for Thomas and his 3 associates. Clara learned this sitting in Rothwell's study, surrounded by newspapers and legal documents. Eleanor burst in, her face flushed with excitement and terror. The police are at his house. Right now. I just heard from a friend. Clara's heart hammered. Did they find him? I don't know. The house is locked up. No one's seen him since yesterday. Of course, Thomas wouldn't wait around to be arrested. He'd run, just like Adrian had predicted weeks ago. But then a messenger arrived with news that changed everything. They found him, the messenger reported breathlessly. At the docks, trying to board a ship to France. He's been taken into custody. The room erupted. Eleanor started crying. Rothwell began issuing orders to his lawyers. Clara just sat there, feeling numb. It was over. Actually over. She'd won. The realization hit her in waves. Thomas arrested. The truth exposed. Justice finally happening. And beneath it all, exhaustion so profound she could barely stand. Miss Whitlock? Eleanor's hand on her shoulder. Are you all right? I don't know, Clara admitted. I think so. Maybe. I'm not sure. Eleanor laughed wetly. I feel the same way. They sat together in Rothwell's study while outside, London absorbed the scandal. Clara knew there would be more to do, testimony to give, proceedings to endure, probably years of legal battles. But for now, in this moment, she let herself simply breathe. A knock at the door. One of the security guards. Miss Whitlock, you have a visitor. Says it's important. Who? The Duke of Northmere. Clara's breath caught. She looked at Eleanor, who nodded encouragingly. I'll go, Eleanor said. Give you privacy. She swept out. Clara sat frozen, her heart racing for entirely different reasons now. Adrian entered looking exactly as she remembered, severe, controlled, those gray eyes missing nothing. But she saw new lines around his mouth, shadows under his eyes. You did it, he said without preamble. I saw the papers. We did it. Your evidence was crucial. Ubo petit, michouez. You're the one who kept fighting when I told you to stop. Adrian moved closer. You were right, about everything. I was trying to protect you when what you needed was support. Adrian, let me finish. His voice was rough. I spent weeks convinced I knew better, that my experience and resources meant I understood the situation more clearly than you did. But I was wrong. You understood perfectly. I just didn't trust you to handle it. Thus, Clara felt tears prick her eyes. You were trying to help. I was trying to control. There's a difference. Adrian stopped a few feet away. I'm sorry for not listening, for making you feel like you had to leave to prove yourself. You never needed to prove anything, not to me. I needed to prove it to myself, Clara said softly. I needed to know I could fight this battle, that I was strong enough. And now you know. Oh, yes. Now I know. She met his eyes. I'm not going back to Blackmore Estate. Something flickered across Adrian's face. Pain, maybe. But he nodded. I understand. Not because I don't care about you or the work we started there. Clara stood. But because I need to build something of my own, not under your protection, not as someone you're helping, as myself. What will you do? Rothwell's offered to fund a proper charitable foundation, with Eleanor and me managing it. Millbrook will be the first project, but not the last. We're going to create real, sustainable medical support for communities that need it. That's ambitious. It's necessary. Clara managed a small smile. Someone once told me sentiment isn't enough. You have to build structures that last. Adrian's mouth quirked, almost a smile. Someone sounds wise. He had his moments. They stood in silence, the weight of everything unspoken hanging between them. I'll still need partners, Clara said finally. People with resources and expertise, people I trust. Are you asking for my help? I'm asking if you'd be interested in a genuine partnership, equal voices, shared decisions, no one trying to protect anyone else from their own choices. Adrian studied her face. That sounds difficult. Probably, but also honest. Honest. Adrian seemed to test the word. Yes, I think I'd like that. He held out his hand. Clara took it, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers. Partners? She said. Partners? Adrian agreed. The moment stretched, charged with possibility. Then Adrian stepped back, releasing her hand. I should go. You have a great deal to manage here, but when you're ready to discuss the foundation, send word. I'll make time. He left before Clara could respond. She stood alone in the study, her hand still warm from his touch, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. Eleanor reappeared in the doorway. Well? He apologized, offered to partner on the foundation. And nothing, that's all. Eleanor gave her a knowing look. Clara, I've seen the way that man looks at you. That's not nothing. It has to be nothing. For now, anyway, I need to focus on the work, on building something real. You can do both. Well, maybe someday, but not yet. Clara moved to the window, looking out at London's gray streets. Right now, I need to prove I can stand alone, without anyone's protection or support or love. Clara's throat tightened, especially that. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. You know that's just fear talking, right? The same fear that kept you silent for 2 years. This is different. Is it? Or are you just afraid that being with someone might make you weak again? The words hit harder than Clara expected. She turned to face Eleanor. What if it does? What if it doesn't? Eleanor countered. What if you've spent so long equating love with losing yourself that you can't imagine a relationship where you keep your strength? Can you? After Thomas? Eleanor's expression softened. I don't know, but I'd like to try. With someone worthy of it. Someday. She moved to stand beside Clara. You've spent months fighting for justice. Don't let fear cheat you out of something good. Clara wanted to argue, but Eleanor's words settled in her chest, uncomfortable and true. Before she could respond, Rothwell burst into the room, waving a newspaper. Have you seen this? The Treasury's announced a full investigation, parliamentary inquiry. They're calling it the largest charitable fraud case in 50 years. That's good, isn't it? Clara asked. It's more than good. It means official recognition, validation. Everything you fought for is being taken seriously at the highest levels. Rothwell's eyes gleamed. And they want you to testify, you and Eleanor both, before Parliament. Clara felt her stomach drop. Parliament? Think of it. The The two of you standing in front of the most powerful men in England telling your story. It'll be devastating, historic. Eleanor had gone pale. I can't speak in front of Parliament. You can, Clara said, surprising herself with her certainty. We both can. How can you be so sure? Because we've already done the hardest part. We told the truth when everyone said we were lying. We fought back when they tried to silence us. Parliament is just a bigger audience. Eleanor searched Clara's face, then slowly nodded. All right, if you're there with me. I will be, every step. Rothwell grinned. Excellent, the hearing is in 2 weeks. I'll arrange everything. Lawyers, preparation, security. This is our chance to ensure the reforms stick, to create real change. After he left, Eleanor sank into a chair. I'm terrified. Me too, Clara admitted. But we're going to do it anyway. The next 2 weeks passed in intense preparation. Lawyers coached Clara and Eleanor on parliamentary procedure. They rehearsed testimonies, anticipated hostile questions, practiced keeping composure under pressure. Clara met with victims from Millbrook and other communities, documenting their stories. Each testimony added weight to the case. Each voice strengthened the argument for systemic reform. And slowly, public opinion continued to shift. The newspapers that had called Clara unstable now praised her courage. Society matrons who'd shunned her sent invitations. Women she'd never met wrote letters thanking her for speaking up. It was dizzying and strange and deeply uncomfortable. Clara didn't want to be a hero. She just wanted justice. But she was beginning to understand that justice and heroism were sometimes the same thing. The night before the parliamentary testimony, Clara sat in her room reviewing notes she'd practically memorized. A knock at the door. Come in. Adrian entered carrying a small box. I thought you might need this, he said, handing it to her. Clara opened it to find a simple silver pin, a small bird with wings spread. It was Catherine's, Adrian said quietly. My sister. She wore it when she had to do difficult things. Said it reminded her she could fly if she just had courage. Clara's eyes burned. Adrian, I can't. You can. She'd want you to have it. You remind me of her, that same stubborn determination to do what's right, regardless of cost. What happened to her? You said pneumonia, but Adrian was quiet for a long moment. We were traveling in Scotland. She got sick. The local physician was drunk, incompetent. By the time I found proper help, it was too late. His voice went flat. She died because we were in the wrong place with the wrong doctor, because access to care depended on luck and location instead of need. I'm so sorry. Don't be. Just use that pin. Remember, you're not alone in this fight. Catherine would have loved what you're doing, and so do I. The words hung between them. Clara looked up to find Adrian watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name. Thank you, she said softly, for everything, for believing me when no one else would, for teaching me that justice requires structure, not just sentiment, for... Adrian stepped closer. Close enough she could see the silver in his dark hair, the precise lines of his face. Clara, he said, when this is over, when you've built your foundation and changed the world and proven everything you need to prove to yourself, would you consider, that is, might you be interested in... Yes, Clara interrupted. Adrian blinked. I haven't finished asking. I know, but the answer is yes. Whatever you're asking, yes. A slow smile spread across Adrian's face. The first real, unguarded smile Clara had ever seen from him. It transformed his entire face. Good, he said. Then I'll wait. However long it takes. He left. Clara sat holding the silver pin, her heart full of something that felt dangerously like hope. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Clara dressed in her finest, a deep blue dress Eleanor had commissioned specifically for the testimony. She pinned Catherine's bird to her collar. The parliamentary chamber was enormous, all dark wood and vaulted ceilings. Rows of stern-faced men watched as Clara and Eleanor were sworn in. Thomas sat in the gallery, flanked by guards. His face was haggard, his expensive suit rumpled. When his eyes met Clara's, she saw hatred so pure it should have frightened her. Instead, she felt nothing but pity. The questioning began. Clara told her story from the beginning, the engagement, the broken relationship, the charity work, discovering the theft. She presented evidence methodically, clearly, without emotion. When hostile questions came, she answered with facts. When they tried to paint her as vindictive, she pointed to the victims. When they suggested she'd fabricated evidence, she cited Professor Aldridge's independent verification. Eleanor testified next, her voice shaking at first but growing stronger. She detailed Thomas's manipulation, his schemes, the moment she'd realized what he truly was. By the end, several parliamentarians were visibly angry. Others looked shaken. The chairman called for a recess. Clara and Eleanor retreated to a side room, both trembling with released tension. "We did it," Eleanor breathed. "Not yet. They still have to rule." The door opened. A clerk appeared. "Miss Whitlock? Miss Rothwell? They've reached a decision." That was impossibly fast. Clara's stomach clenched as they returned to the chamber. The chairman stood. "After hearing today's testimony and reviewing the extensive evidence, this committee finds sufficient grounds for criminal prosecution of Thomas Ashford and his associates. Furthermore, we recommend immediate reforms to charitable oversight and grant disbursement procedures." He continued speaking, outlining specific changes, but Clara barely heard. The words criminal prosecution rang in her ears like bells. They'd won. Actually, truly won. The chamber erupted in discussion. Reporters rushed to take notes. Thomas was led away by guards, his face a mask of fury. Clara stood frozen until Eleanor grabbed her hand. "We did it," Eleanor said again, tears streaming down her face. "We actually did it." This time, Clara believed her. Outside the parliamentary building, a crowd had gathered. News had spread fast. As Clara and Eleanor emerged, people began applauding. Clara stood on the steps, overwhelmed by the sound. These weren't society matrons or wealthy donors. These were ordinary people, workers, servants, people who'd been stolen from and ignored and told they didn't matter. And they were applauding her. A woman pushed forward from the crowd, middle-aged, work-worn hands, kind eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. "My husband died 3 years ago. Couldn't afford medicine. We donated to Mr. Ashford's charity, thought we were helping. Now we know where that money really went." She gripped Clara's hand. "Thank you for making them listen." Clara couldn't speak. She just nodded, throat too tight for words. More people approached. More thanks. More stories of loss and frustration, and finally, hope that things might change. By the time Clara and Eleanor made it to Rothwell's carriage, Clara's face was wet with tears. "That," Eleanor said softly, "is why we fought." "Yes," Clara agreed. "That's exactly why." As the carriage rolled away, Clara looked back at the crowd, at the parliamentary building where justice had finally been served, at the city that had tried to break her and failed. She touched the silver pin on her collar, thought of Catherine, who'd never had the chance to fight for the changes she deserved, thought of Adrian, waiting for her to finish proving herself, thought of all the work still ahead, building the foundation, reforming systems, ensuring Thomas's case led to real change. It would be hard, probably impossible some days, but for the first time in her life, Clara felt truly ready. Not because she was fearless, but because she'd learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing to speak anyway, to fight anyway, to stand anyway. And she was done being silent. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Clara attended every day, sitting in the gallery with Eleanor and watching justice unfold in agonizing increments. Thomas's lawyers tried everything: character assassination, procedural delays, claims of entrapment, but the evidence was too strong. Fletcher's documents, Eleanor's testimony, Professor Aldridge's analysis, the Treasury's own investigation. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned with guilty verdicts on all counts, Clara felt something unlock in her chest. Not triumph exactly, more like release. The weight she'd carried for years, guilt, shame, complicity, finally lifting. Thomas was sentenced to 12 years. His associates received similar terms. The judge's words were scathing. "You exploited the generosity of good people and the desperation of the poor. You perverted charity into theft. And you did so without remorse or conscience. This court finds your actions reprehensible and your sentences just." Thomas was led away in chains. He didn't look at Clara, not once. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Clara gave a brief statement, thanking the victims who'd spoken up, the officials who'd listened, the jury who'd believed the evidence. Then she escaped to Rothwell's carriage before the questions could overwhelm her. "It's done," Eleanor said, slumping against the seat. "Actually done." "The criminal case is done," Clara corrected. "The real work is just beginning." She was right. The Whitlock-Rothwell Foundation, named over Clara's protests but Eleanor had insisted, launched 3 months after the verdict. Rothwell provided the initial funding. Adrian contributed resources and connections. Clara and Eleanor managed operations. Their first project was Millbrook. They rebuilt the dispensary, hired permanent staff, established supply chains that couldn't be disrupted. Dr. Grayson agreed to stay on as medical director. Mrs. Garrett trained 3 additional nurses. Within 6 months, they'd expanded to 4 more communities. Within a year, 12. The model was simple but effective. Local control, sustainable funding, transparency at every level. Clara threw herself into the work with single-minded focus. She traveled constantly, inspecting sites, meeting with community leaders, solving problems as they arose. It was exhausting and consuming and exactly what she needed. It also meant she barely saw Adrian. He kept his promise about partnership, provided funding, opened doors, offered advice when asked, but he maintained careful distance. No presumption, no pressure, just steady support from afar. Clara told herself she was grateful for the space. She needed to prove the foundation could succeed on its own merits, not because a duke was backing it. She needed to establish her own credibility. But late at night, in quiet moments between crises, she found herself thinking about gray eyes and careful hands, and a man who'd believed her when belief meant risk. Eleanor noticed, of course. "You're miserable," she said one evening as they reviewed budget reports in the foundation's small London office. "I'm fine." "You're working yourself to exhaustion and pretending it's fulfillment." Clara set down her pen. "The foundation is fulfilling." "I didn't say it wasn't, but it's not enough, not by itself." "Eleanor, when's the last time you saw Adrian?" Well, Clara's throat tightened. 2 months ago. The quarterly review meeting. And before that? 3 months. The site inspection in Millbrook. Do you see the problem? There is no problem. We're both busy. The foundation requires Clara. Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. You're hiding again. Just in work instead of silence this time. The words hit like a physical blow. Clara wanted to deny them, but Eleanor's steady gaze didn't allow for evasion. What if I'm not enough? Clara heard herself say. Without the crisis, without the fight, what if I'm just ordinary? What if you are? Eleanor countered. Would that make you less worthy of love? Clara didn't have an answer. The crisis came from an unexpected direction. Margaret Winters, the Treasury auditor who'd helped expose Thomas. She appeared at the foundation office on a cold January morning, her face drawn. We have a problem. Clara's stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Mom, someone's been spreading rumors that your foundation is just another fraud, that you're using your reputation as a victim to run the same kind of scheme Thomas did. That's insane. Our books are completely transparent. I know. But the rumors are gaining traction. Questions are being asked in Parliament. Some of your donors are getting nervous. Winters sat heavily. I think Thomas's associates are behind it. The ones who weren't prosecuted. They're trying to destroy your credibility from the shadows. Clara felt cold fury settle in her bones. How do we stop them? You can't. Not directly. They're too careful to leave evidence. Winters met her eyes. But you can prove them wrong. Open your books completely. Invite independent audits. Make the foundation so transparent that even the most determined rumor can't find purchase. We're already transparent. Then be more transparent. Publish everything. Make it impossible to question. Eleanor spoke up. That could backfire. If we look defensive, if we don't do it, the rumors win, Clara interrupted, and everything we've built collapses. She made the decision that afternoon. Full financial disclosure. Independent audits from 3 separate firms. Public reports on every expenditure, every decision, every outcome. It was terrifying, but it was also the only option. The auditors arrived within the week. Serious men with ledgers and skeptical expressions. They combed through every document, questioned every decision, verified every claim. Clara cooperated fully. So did Eleanor. They had nothing to hide. But the process was grueling. Every choice Clara had made was scrutinized, every penny accounted for. The auditors were thorough to the point of invasiveness. And through it all, the rumors continued to spread. Clara started receiving threatening letters. Anonymous notes calling her a fraud, a liar. Worse. Security had to be increased at the foundation offices and at Clara's home. Eleanor wanted to fight back publicly. Clara refused. "Let the audit speak," she said. "Facts will win, eventually." "And if they don't?" Clara didn't answer. The breaking point came on a site visit to Millbrook. Clara arrived to find the dispensary's windows smashed, supplies scattered, graffiti sprayed across the walls. Thieves, liars, fraud. Mrs. Garrett was in tears. Dr. Grayson looked furious. "Who did this?" Clara asked, her voice shaking. "Don't know. Happened last night. Someone from outside the village must be. No one here would. Mrs. Garrett couldn't finish. Clara surveyed the damage. Years of work, months of building trust, destroyed in a single night. She wanted to scream or cry, or both. Instead, she rolled up her sleeves. "All right, let's clean this up. Clara, we should report this to the authorities. We will, but first we fix it. We don't let them win by shutting down." Dr. Grayson nodded slowly. "I'll get supplies." They worked through the day, Clara and Eleanor alongside Dr. Grayson and Mrs. Garrett, and volunteers from the village, sweeping glass, washing walls, restocking shelves. By evening, the dispensary was functional again. Not perfect, but operational. The old man appeared at dusk, the one whose wife had died. He surveyed the cleaned space and nodded once. "You came back," he said. "Again. Of course. They're trying to drive you away." "I know. But you're staying." Clara met his eyes. "I'm staying." The old man studied her face, then did something unexpected. He smiled. "Good. You're stubborn. We need stubborn." After he left, Clara sat on the dispensary steps, exhausted and filthy, and somehow more certain than she'd been in months. Eleanor sat beside her. "You know this won't stop, right? They'll keep attacking." "I know." "And you're okay with that?" Clara thought about it, really thought about it. "No," she said honestly. "I hate it. I'm terrified. Every day I wake up wondering if today's the day everything collapses." She paused. "But I'm not quitting, because this matters more than my fear." Eleanor leaned against her shoulder. "When did you get so brave?" "I'm not brave. I'm just tired of running." They sat in silence as night settled over Millbrook. Lights began appearing in windows. Smoke rose from chimneys, signs of life continuing despite everything. The audit results came 3 weeks later. All three firms reached the same conclusion. The foundation's finances were impeccable. Every pound accounted for. No irregularities, no fraud. Clara released the reports publicly with a simple statement. The truth speaks for itself. The rumors didn't stop immediately, but they lost power. Donors who'd hesitated renewed their commitments. New supporters came forward. The foundation's work continued, and slowly, painfully, Clara's credibility solidified. 6 months after the audit reports, Clara received an invitation that stopped her cold, a royal commendation ceremony for outstanding service in charitable reform and advocacy for the vulnerable. "You're not serious," she said to Eleanor, who'd brought the invitation. "Completely serious. The Queen herself wants to recognize your work." Clara stared at the heavy cream paper. "I don't want recognition. I just want the work to continue." "Can it be both?" "I don't know how to be that, the person who gets commended by royalty." Eleanor laughed. "Clara, you testified before Parliament. You survived a smear campaign and a trial and 3 separate audits. I think you can handle a ceremony." "That's different. That was fighting. This is winning." The word felt strange, foreign, but maybe accurate. The ceremony was held at the palace in April. Clara wore a dress Eleanor had commissioned, deep emerald silk, simple but elegant, Catherine's pin at her collar. The hall was enormous, full of people being honored for various achievements. Scientists, artists, military officers. Clara felt absurdly out of place among them. And then she saw Adrian. He stood near the back, watching the proceedings with his usual careful attention. When his eyes found hers, something in Clara's chest loosened. She made her way to him through the crowd. "You came," she said. "Of course, I wouldn't miss this." "I didn't think you'd be invited." "I wasn't. I came anyway." Adrian's mouth quirked, Turns out being a duke means you can crash most events if you're persistent enough. Clara laughed, actually laughed. It felt good. How have you been? Adrian asked. Busy, terrified, determined. She paused. Happy, mostly, when I let myself be. Good. You deserve happiness. So do you. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Clara. A trumpet sounded. The ceremony was beginning. Clara squeezed Adrian's hand once and moved to join the other honorees. The queen was smaller than Clara expected. Older, but her eyes were sharp and kind. Miss Whitlock, she said as Clara approached the throne, your work has brought dignity to those who'd been denied it. You have our gratitude and admiration. She presented Clara with a medal, heavy gold on a blue ribbon. Clara accepted it with shaking hands. Thank you, Your Majesty. No, Miss Whitlock. Thank you. Clara returned to her seat in a daze. The medal felt impossibly heavy. She looked down at it, at her name engraved on the back, and felt tears prick her eyes. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Clara moved through it mechanically, accepting congratulations, making small talk, counting the minutes until she could leave. She escaped to a terrace overlooking the palace gardens. The spring air was cool and welcome after the stifling hall. Hiding? Adrian's voice. Clara turned to find him leaning against the doorway. Taking a breath? Understandable. That was quite an ordeal. I don't know how to do this, Clara admitted. Be the person everyone thinks I am. The hero, the reformer. I'm just me. Just you is enough. Adrian moved to stand beside her at the railing. You don't have to be anything more than what you are. And what am I? Stubborn, brave, willing to fight for what's right, even when it costs everything. He paused. Also infuriating sometimes, and impossible to ignore. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. Adrian. I've waited a year, he said quietly. Gave you space to build your foundation, prove yourself, become who you needed to become. But Clara, I can't wait anymore. Not without knowing if there's any chance. Yes, Clara interrupted. Adrian stopped. Yes? Yes, there's a chance. More than a chance. Clara turned to face him fully. I've been terrified. Of losing myself again. Of making the same mistakes. Of proving that I only know how to be strong when I'm alone. You're not your mistakes, and you're not Thomas. I know, but knowing and believing are different things. Then what do you believe now? Clara thought about it. Really thought. I believe I'm tired of being afraid. I believe you're the only person who's ever seen me completely, weak and strong, scared and brave, and never asked me to be anything else. She took a breath. And I believe I'm in love with you. Have been for months. Maybe longer. Adrian's expression transformed. The careful control dropped away, leaving something raw and real. I love you too, he said. Have since you walked out of my house insisting you could fight this battle alone. Maybe before. I was so angry at you. I know, you were right to be. And you were right that I wasn't ready then. I needed to prove I could stand alone before I could stand with someone. And now? Clara reached for his hand. Now I'm ready. If you'll have a partner who's stubborn and infuriating and occasionally impossible. Adrian laced his fingers through hers. I think I can manage that. He leaned down and kissed her. Gentle at first, then deeper. Clara felt something settle inside her. Not completion exactly, but balance. Two people who'd both learned hard lessons choosing to build something together. When they pulled apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. What happens now? He asked. We keep working. Building the foundation, expanding to more communities, creating real, lasting change. Together? Together, Clara confirmed. Equal partners. In everything. That sounds perfect. It sounds terrifying. That too. Adrian smiled. But we're good at terrifying. Clara laughed and kissed him again. They returned to Millbrook the following week. Together this time, not as protector and protected, but as partners. The village had continued to thrive. The dispensary busy, children healthier, families more secure. Mrs. Garrett greeted them with warm tea and updates on recent cases. Dr. Grayson showed them plans for expanding services. The old man stopped by just to nod approvingly at seeing Clara back. Standing in the dispensary she'd fought so hard to save, surrounded by evidence of lives changed and systems improved, Clara felt something she'd never quite experienced before. Peace. Not the absence of struggle. The foundation still faced challenges. There were more communities to help, more reforms to push, more battles to fight. But peace in knowing she was doing work that mattered, with people who trusted her, alongside a man who loved her not despite her strength but because of it. That evening, she and Adrian walked through the village as sunset painted the sky gold and pink. They stopped at the edge of town, looking back at the dispensary's blue door, freshly painted again after the vandalism. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't run from that wedding?" Adrian asked. Clara considered it. "Sometimes, but I think I needed to run, needed to break everything open before I could rebuild it properly." "No regrets?" "Regrets. Plenty of regrets about staying silent so long, about not seeing Thomas's lies sooner, about all the time lost." She squeezed his hand, "But not about running, and definitely not about where I ended up. With an infuriating duke? With a partner who taught me the difference between protection and support." Adrian pulled her close. "We should head back. Eleanor's expecting us for dinner. In a minute." Clara turned for one last look at the village, at the dispensary and the homes and the people moving through their evening routines, at the life she'd helped restore through stubbornness and courage and refusing to accept that justice was impossible. She thought of the woman she'd been 2 years ago, quiet, compliant, afraid to speak. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone harder, more certain, scarred by the fight but stronger for it. Someone who'd learned that truth didn't automatically win, but silence guaranteed losing. Someone who'd discovered that real power wasn't control over others. It was refusing to be controlled. Someone who'd found love not by making herself small, but by becoming fully herself. Clara Whitlock touched the medal in her pocket, the royal commendation she still couldn't quite believe, felt Adrian's solid presence beside her, heard laughter from the village behind her, and smiled. The fight wasn't over. Corruption still existed. Systems still needed reform. People still needed advocates willing to speak when speaking cost everything. But she wasn't alone anymore, and she wasn't afraid. Eleanor met them at the Foundation's cottage with dinner and wine and plans for the next expansion. They ate together, the three of them, talking late into the night about budgets and sites, and the delicate balance between ambition and sustainability. "We need to be careful," Eleanor said. "Expand too fast and we risk everything we've built. Expand too slowly and people suffer while we're being cautious," Clara countered. Adrian listened to them debate, his expression fond. "You're both right, which means we find the middle path." "There is no middle path," Clara and Eleanor said simultaneously, then laughed. "Then we make one," Adrian said. "That's what we do. Create solutions where none existed before." It was past midnight when Eleanor finally headed to bed. Clara and Adrian stayed up, reviewing documents by candlelight, shoulders touching, working in comfortable silence. "This is nice," Clara said eventually. "Paperwork?" "Partnership. Real partnership. Not you rescuing me or me proving myself. Just working together. It is nice." Adrian set down his pen. "Although I have to say, being your partner means dealing with your absolutely terrible handwriting. Vos caches." Clara threw a wadded paper at him. He caught it, grinning. "I love you," she said. Simple. True. "I love you too, even with the handwriting." They finished their work and walked back to the main house hand in hand. Stars filled the sky above Millbrook, bright and steady. The air smelled of smoke and spring and possibility. In the distance, a clock tower chimed 1. Clara counted the bells and thought about time. How much she'd lost. How much she'd gained. How impossible it was to predict which moments would change everything. Running from that wedding, colliding with Adrian, hearing those men discuss stolen funds. Every choice had led here, to this moment. This work. This love. "What are you thinking?" Adrian asked. "That I'm grateful. For all of it. Even the hard parts." "The hard parts especially?" "Maybe. They taught me things I needed to learn." They reached the house. Adrian pulled her close, his arms solid and warm around her. "We should sleep," he said. "Tomorrow will be busy." "Tomorrow's always busy." "True." He kissed her forehead. "But we'll face it together." "Together," Clara agreed. She went to bed with Adrian beside her and hope in her chest. Sleep came easily, dreamless and deep. When morning arrived, Clara woke to sunlight and birdsong and Adrian's quiet breathing. She lay still for a moment, savoring the peace. Then she rose, dressed, and went downstairs to begin the day's work. There were communities to help, systems to reform, justice to pursue. And she was ready, not because she was fearless, not because the fight was easy, but because she'd learned the most important lesson of all, that silence was complicity, that speaking up was power, that justice required not just belief, but action, and that she, Clara Whitlock, once silent and afraid, had both the courage and the voice to fight for what was right, whatever it cost, for as long as it took. Together with people who believed in the same stubborn hope that had carried her this far, the hope that truth mattered, that change was possible, that one person's voice, raised against corruption and cruelty, could make a difference. Clara stepped outside into morning light, the foundation's work waiting, Adrian and Eleanor beside her, and the future wide open. And she was finally, completely, unshakably herself, ready to face whatever came next.